9. Have you tried love's way? Love, like the sun, never sees the dark side of anything. You can purchase a man's labor, you've got to cultivate his goodwill. Sweeter than the perfume of roses is the possession of a kind, charitable, unselfish nature, a ready disposition to do for others any good turn in one's power. A New York man who saw a little girl carrying a crippled boy across a street, offered to assist her, telling her that the boy was too heavy for her to carry. "Oh, no," said the child quickly, "he's not heavy, he's my brother." Oh, marvelous power of love that lightens all heavy burdens and smooths all rough roads. What would become of humanity were it not for love, which sweetens the hardest labor and makes self-sacrifice a joy? It is the greatest force in the universe. Without its transforming power we should still be primitive barbarians. In spite of the loud cries of pessimists and skeptics to the contrary, its light is still leading men upward. Although the dream of the world's peacemakers has come to naught and Europe is plunged in a merciless war, yet there are multitudes of signs of the reign of love. Its merciful healing power is at work even on the cruel battlefield. We see it animating the great army of Red Cross surgeons and nurses, who, regardless of creed or country, racial or social differences, are treating all the wounded soldiers as brothers, binding up their wounds and nursing them back to health and life. Love is healing the hurts made by hate and discord. We see its influence in the miracle which the leaven of the Golden Rule is performing in the business world, in the passion for social service in the world at large, in the gradual obliteration of class distinctions, in the growing efforts to ameliorate the conditions of the poor, in the great wave of reform that is beating against the walls of all our institutions, our jails, our poorhouses, our reformatories, our insane asylums. The abuses with which these places were filled are gradually being cleared up by love. In many of our prisons, the kindly, brotherhood system of treatment that has been inaugurated is really helping to reform criminals, whereas the old system of penology killed men, broke their spirit, or made them more hardened in crime. It rarely, if ever, reformed. Love's way must in time banish altogether the old cruel prison methods, and ultimately the criminal himself. When the world is run by love, by the Golden Rule plan, crime will die a natural death. Everyone who slips from the right path, no matter what he has done, should be given another chance, a fresh opportunity to make good, to rebuild his character. One who has sinned against society should not be expelled from the sympathies, the goodwill and the kindliness of his fellow men. Criminals should be treated as unfortunate brothers and sisters who have stumbled and lost their way on the life path. Love is the only medium that will help them to rise, to get back into the current that runs Godward. People who understand them, who see a God in the ruins that evil influences have made, would make good men and women out of the great majority of our prisoners. Many of these poor wretches never had an opportunity. They never felt the magic touch of love, never knew the influence of a good home, of honest, loving parents. Most of them did not have a right start in life. They were handicapped at birth by ignorance, by disease, by vicious parentage. They never had a fair chance. Love's way would give them one. Shutting them into cramped, miserable, sunless cells, with none of the comforts or conveniences of life, where none of the humanities reach them, meeting them out treatment we would not dream of inflicting on our domestic animals, is like trying to put out fire with kerosene oil. Such treatment makes them worse, arouses their basest passions of revenge, bitterness and hatred, fills them with a determination to get even with society. Society is beginning to wake up to the futility of such brutal methods. It is beginning to apply love's way to its criminal classes, to all classes. Our free hospitals, our homes for the aged and poor, our public asylums, are all, like our prisons, working upward toward the light. The fallen, the sick, the poor, the old, the maimed, the bruised and suffering, everywhere are receiving more consideration, more humane treatment, more kindness. And we are finding that greater trust in them, greater sympathy and greater interest in our unfortunate brothers and sisters, are working a marvelous change in human conditions. In other words, in spite of many seeming contradictions, many glaring evils in our midst, many setbacks and discouragements, the Spirit of the Christ, of the Golden Rule, is acting like a healing leaven and performing miracles in the great human mass. Love is the great mind opener, the great heart opener and life enricher, the great developer. It is what holds society together, and if children were trained to love humanity, to love all countries and their inhabitants as they are taught to love their own country and countrymen, there would be no wars. War proceeds largely from what is called patriotism. And patriotism in its narrower sense, which seeks only its own good, its own aggrandizement, at the expense of other countries and peoples, has ever been the curse of the race. When our love is big enough to say, "The world is my country," wars will cease. A few days ago I was attracted by an advertisement in a morning paper which said, "When every other physician has given you up, when you have failed to find relief from all other sources, then come to me. You are the sort of person I cure." The advertiser may have been a quack, but the advertisement would make its appeal, perhaps, to the desperate, the discouraged, who had been given up as incurable by the regular profession, and it set me to thinking. Why, this, I said to myself, is the language of divine love's advertisement. "Come unto me all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." When you have failed to find comfort, satisfaction or joy in anything else, when your friends have deserted you, when your business is ruined, when you have made fatal mistakes and society has closed its doors on you, when everybody else rejects and denounces you, when everything else has failed, then come to me and you shall find peace and rest. Love is the sovereign remedy. It is the last resort of those driven to desperation. When nothing else is left, when life is full of bitterness and anguish, the thief, the murderer, the failure, the outcast turns to love and finds a refuge, for love never faileth. Love is to every human being what mother love is to the erring child. No son or daughter has ever fallen so low as to get beyond a mother's love. When society has turned its back on the outcast, when the prison door closes behind him, when companions have fled, when sympathy and mercy have departed, when the world has forgotten, the mother remembers and loves her child. She visits her boy in the death house, her daughter in the dens of vice in the slums. The child can never stray too far for the mother's love to follow. It is the most perfect prototype of our Father-Mother God's love. The Vedanta scriptures, which are thousands of years older than the Old Testament of our Bible, commanded us to love our neighbors as ourselves because we are all neighbors, because of the oneness of all life, because the same Spirit is in all human beings. Until we see and live in conscious cooperation with this oneness of Spirit, until the world sees it in all human beings, there will be public strife, private quarrels, greed, selfish ambition, inhumanity of man to man, poverty, crime, all sorts of wretchedness and misery. Love alone can wipe all these out. Human laws, repression, punishment will never do it. Christ's way, love's way, holds the solution of all life's problems. I was talking recently with a cold-blooded, overbearing, brow-beating businessman who told me he was going out of business because he was so tired and sick of incompetent, dishonest help. His employees, he said, were always taking advantage of him, stealing, spoiling merchandise, blundering, shirking, clipping their hours. They took no interest in his welfare, their only concern being in what they found in their pay envelope. "I have enough to live on," he concluded, "and I don't propose to run a business for their benefit. I have tried every means I know of to get good work out of ignorant, selfish help, but it is no use, and now I have done with it. My nervous system is worn out and I must give up the game." You say you have tried everything you could think of in managing your employees, but has it ever occurred to you to try love's way? I asked. "Love's way," he said disgustedly. "What do you mean by that?" "Why, if I didn't use a club all the time my help would ride right over me and ruin me. For years I have had to employ detectives and spies to protect my interests. What do these people know about love? Why I would have the red flag out here in no time if I should attempt any such fool business as that. A young man who had been successful in Golden Rule management hearing of the situation saw in it a possible opening, and asked this man to give him a trial as manager before giving up his business altogether. The result was, he was so pleased with him that in less than half an hour he had engaged him as manager, although he still insisted that it was a very doubtful experiment. The first thing the new man did on taking charge was to call the employees in each department together and have a heart-to-heart talk with them. He told them that he had come there not only as a friend of the proprietor, but as their friend also, and that he would do everything in his power to advance their interests as well as those of the business. The house, he told them, had been losing money for years, and it was up to him and them to change all that and put the balance on the right side of the ledger. He made them see that harmony and cooperation are the basis of any real success for a concern and its employees. From the start he was cheerful, hopeful, sympathetic, enthusiastic, encouraging. He quickly won the confidence and goodwill of everybody in the establishment, and had them all working as heartily for the success of the business as if it were their own. The place was like a great beehive, where all were industrious, happy, contented, working for the hive. So great was the change that customers began to talk about the new spirit in the house. Business grew and prospered, and in an incredibly short time, the concern was making instead of losing money. Yet in many respects the new manager was not nearly as able as his employer, but he had a different spirit. He was animated by a belief in the brotherhood of man. He had sympathy, tact, diplomacy, and a real personal interest in those who worked under him. He never scolded them when they did not do right, he simply talked with them like an elder brother and made them ashamed of themselves. He showed them there was a better way, and they followed it. In short, he won their love and respect and they would do anything for him. The Golden Rule method had driven out hate, selfishness, greed and dissension. The interests of all were centered on the general welfare, and so all prospered. When the proprietor returned from abroad, whither he had gone for a few months' rest and recuperation, he could scarcely believe in the reality of the transformation that Love's Way had effected in his old employees and in the entire establishment. You who have been tortured and torn to pieces for years with hot tempers, with worry, with fear, with hatred and ill will, you who have already committed suicide on many years of your life, why not turn your back on all this and try Love's Way? So far your life has been a disappointment. There must be a better way for all who bear the scars and stains of strife, who have been battered and buffeted by the old evil way, in which there has been no rest, no harmony, no sweetness. Why not try Love's Way? Try it for every trouble, for every hurt and sorrow. Try it, you whose home life has been a bitter disappointment, you husbands and wives who have quarreled, who have never known what peace and comfort are, try Love's Way. It will smooth out all your wrinkles, it will put a new spirit into your home that was never there before, it will bring a new light into your eyes, new hope into your heart, and new joy into your life. You mothers who have worn yourselves to a frazzle and prematurely aged yourselves in trying to bring up your children by scolding, nagging, punishing, driving, why not try Love's Way instead? You can love your boys and girls into obedience and respect much more quickly and with far better results to them and to yourself than by driving them. Appeal to their best and noblest instincts instead of their worst, and you will be surprised how quickly and readily they will respond to your appeal. There is something in human nature which protests against being driven or forced. If you have been trying to force your boys and girls in the past, give it up and try the new way, Love's Way. See if it does not work wonders in your home. See if it will not make your domestic machinery run much more smoothly. See if it will not wonderfully relieve the strain upon yourself. Give Love's Way a trial. Try it, you fault-finding, scolding housewife. Instead of nagging your family, fretting and stewing from morning till night, blaming, upbraiding, complaining, try Love's Way. Instead of berating a maid before your guests when she accidentally breaks a piece of china, put yourself in her place, try to realize her embarrassment, and pass over the mishap cheerfully. Then, in private, give her a gentle word of caution. She will be more careful in the future. If your laundress returns a piece of smirched linen, or if her work is not quite so well done as it was the last time, don't give her a brutal scolding. Harsh treatment will only make her sullen and unhappy, but you will find her susceptible to kindness and gentle words. Give sympathy and kindness instead of scolding and nagging, and you will work a revolution in your household. You will be delighted to find how quickly love's way will change the atmosphere in your family, how soon helpful relations will take the place of antagonistic ones. Praise, generous, wholehearted, unstinted praise, now and then, will not hurt anyone, but, on the contrary, will act like lubricating oil on dry squeaky machinery, and its reflex action on yourself will be magical. You husbands who have been substituting money and luxury for love, who have thought that if a woman had a fine house, beautiful clothes, and all her bills paid, she ought to be satisfied and happy, you who have so miserably failed of your object in this substitution will be surprised to find how much happier you can make your wife by bestowing on her a generous, unselfish love. A very little money, a very humble home with love will make every true woman happier than millions, a palatial home, with indifference. Try love's way, you men who have been lording it over your families, bullying and browbeating your wives and children, using slave-driving methods in your home. You know that this old brutal way has not brought you happiness or satisfaction, you have always been disappointed with it, then why not try the new philosophy, try love's way. It is the great cure-all, it is the Christ remedy which is leavening the world. Try it, you who are worn out with the discord and the hagglings, the trials and tribulations you encounter every day in your business. You men and women who have never been able to get good help, who are driven to desperation with the wicked breakage and wastage of your employees, you who have been through purgatory in your struggle with dishonesty and inefficiency, whose faces are furrowed with cruel wrinkles and prematurely aged in trying to fight evil with evil, try love's way. It will create a new spirit in your store, your factory, your office. Whatever your business, whatever your trials and difficulties, love will ease the jolts of life and smooth your way miraculously. Try love's way, all you who have hitherto lived in purgatory because you did not know this better way. You have tried the getting square policy, the hatred and grudge method, you have tried the revenge way, the jealousy way, you have tried the worry, the anxiety method, and these have pained and tortured you all the more. You have tried law and the courts to settle troubles and difficulties with neighbors and business associates, and perhaps you won lawsuits only to make bitter, lifelong enemies. But perhaps you have never yet tried love's way, excepting in spots. If you have not yet tried it as a principle, as a life philosophy, as a great life lubricant, begin now. It will smooth out all the rough places and wonderfully ease your journey over the jolts of life. You may be wondering why you have so few friends, why you do not attract people, why others are not more interested in you. Look into your heart and you will find the reason. If you are sending out a current of selfishness, of uncharitableness, unkindness, indifference, ingratitude, you cannot get a return current of friendship, of encouragement and helpfulness. The stream that leads back to you will be just like that which goes out in your thought, in your habitual mental attitude. To have friends, to win love, you must make yourself a magnet for love. You must send out the friendly thought current, the helpful current, the kindly, loving current of human fellowship. If you give out stinginess, narrowness, meanness, selfishness, you will not receive love's gifts in return. As you give, so will you receive, and the more generously you give of love and kindness and service, the more generously will the current that returns bear them back to you. The most beautiful thing on this earth, that which every human being craves most, is love. It is, as Henry Ward Beecher said, the river of life in this world. Think not that ye know it who stand at the little tinkling rill, the first small fountain. Not until you have gone through the rocky gorges, and not lost the stream, not until you have gone through the meadow, and the stream has widened and deepened until fleets could ride on its bosom, not until beyond the meadow you have come to the unfathomable ocean, and poured your treasures into its depths, not until then can you know what love is. All through the Bible are passages which extol the height and depth, the breadth and power, the inexhaustibleness of love. The more of love we give out, the more we have. Love maintains perpetual summer in the soul and shuts out winter's chill. Love of man is love of God, and love of God prolongs life. With long life will I satisfy him, declares Jehovah in the words of the psalmist, because he hath set his love upon me. Love is harmony, and harmony prolongs life, as fear, jealousy, envy, friction, and discord shorten it. Those who are filled with the spirit of love, whose sympathies are not confined to their own family, but reach out to every member of the human family, are more exempt from the ills of mankind than the selfish and pessimistic, who lose the better part of life, the joy and the strength that come from giving themselves to others. Some natures are so permeated with the spirit of love, of helpfulness, of unselfishness, that their very presence acts like a balm upon the wounded soul. They radiate harmony, soul sunshine. There is a personal charm about them which strengthens, reassures, and uplifts. No more scientific advice was ever uttered on this earth than, love your enemies. Nothing will take the sting out of unkindness like kindness, nothing will disarm prejudice, hatred, and jealousy like love. It is impossible for anyone to continue to hate us, when we send out to him only love thoughts, love vibrations, or to be jealous of us when we send out to him only kindly, generous, helpful thoughts. Hatred or the spirit of revenge cannot live in the presence of love any more than an acid can retain its biting qualities in the presence of an alkali. One whose heart is filled with love for all cannot possibly have an enemy very long, because love dissolves all enmity, all jealousy, neutralizes, antidotes all hatred. One-sided hatred cannot exist because there is nothing to keep it alive. It must be fed in some way or the fire will die out for lack of fuel. It is simply impossible to keep on feeling unkindly towards another, to continue hating him very long when we discover that he feels kindly toward us and is willing to help us. I have never felt so humiliated in my life as when years ago, in my hot youth, I was rendered a very great service by a man whom I disliked intensely, and against whom I had for some time cherished a grudge. His great-hearted, generous act, which was a real help to me, made me feel utterly ashamed of myself. It showed me as nothing else could have done what a mean, unworthy, contemptible thing it is to nurse a feeling of hate or revenge toward a fellow being. We cannot hold the love thought without feeling the uplift, the glow, the divine energy which it sends through the whole system. Nor, on the other hand, can we hold the hate thought, the revenge, the jealous, the envious, or any other mean, selfish thought, without a feeling of depression, a feeling of smallness, of contemptibleness, which robs us of self-respect and of power. When you denounce and condemn others, when you nurse bitterness and ill will in your heart, you start boomerang vibrations which impair your cell life and seriously mar your happiness and efficiency. One of the great benefits of devotional exercise, of prayer, of contemplation, of divine thinking, is that this mental attitude sets in motion vibrations which have a helpful, uplifting influence on both mind and body. Where love and affection are habitually vibrating through the cell life, they develop a poise and serenity of character, a sweetness and strength, a peace and satisfaction that reinforce the whole being. Love soothes and strengthens. Hate lacerates, wrinkles, weakens. The character of people who keep themselves continually stirred up by discordant emotions, who live in discordant homes where there is perpetual wrangling, criticism, denunciation, scolding, twitting, are cold, skeptical, unlovely, selfish. Their affections become marbleized. There is nothing outside of vice which will deform the character so quickly as living in an atmosphere of perpetual hatred, jealousy, envy, and revenge. The wear and tear of their vicious vibrations is ever getting in its deadly work. Love is the great disciplinarian, the supreme harmonizer, the true peacemaker. It is the great balm for all that blights happiness or breeds discontent, a sovereign panacea for malice, revenge, and all brutish passions and propensities. As cruelty melts before kindness, so the evil passions find their antidote in sweet charity and loving sympathy. One reason why a happy home is the sweetest, most beautiful spot on earth is because the love atmosphere, the harmony vibrations give a blessed sensation of harmony, of rest, of safety, security and power. The moment we enter such a place we feel its soothing, reassuring, uplifting atmosphere. It produces a feeling of mental poise, of serenity which we do not experience anywhere else. During a recent visit to a large family, I was much impressed by the power of one person to create this beautiful home spirit. In this family was one sister who, though the youngest member, seemed to take the place of the mother, who was dead. This young girl was the apparent center of the home. Nothing of importance was undertaken by any of her brothers without consulting her. Not one of them would leave the house without first kissing her goodbye, and she was the first one they sought when they came home. They all seemed anxious to confide to her their little secrets, to tell her of what had happened to them during the day, to have her opinion and advice in all difficulties. The secret of this young girl's influence lay in her great interest in the boys, and her wonderful love for them. In talking with the brothers, I discovered that each thought that the sister was especially interested in him and his affairs, and that he would not think of undertaking or deciding anything of importance without first consulting her. Each and all of them seemed to prefer her company to that of any other young lady, and were always proud to escort her when she went anywhere. Those boys are all clean-minded, open, frank and chivalrous, and I could not help thinking that a great deal of it was due to the sister's influence. To love, and to be loved, said Sydney Smith, is the greatest happiness of existence. Every one, rich and poor, high and low, is reaching out for love. What will not a man do to win the love of one who embodies his ideal of womanhood, one in whom he sees all the beautiful qualities that he himself lacks? This love is really a divine hunger, the longing for possession of what would make him a whole man instead of the half one he feels he is. Why is it that when a coarse-grained, brutal, dissipated man falls in love with a sweet, pure girl, he immediately changes his ways, looks up, thinks up, braces up, drops his profanity, is more refined, more choice in his language, more exclusive in his associations, and is, to all appearances, for the time at least, a changed man? Simply because love is a more powerful motive to the man than dissipation. He drops the latter, and if his love is steady and true, he will never again indulge in any degrading practice. Who has not seen the magic power of love in transforming rough, uncouth men into refined and devoted husbands? I have known women who had such great, loving, helpful hearts, and such charm of manner, that the worst men, the most hardened characters, would do anything in the world for them, would give up their lives even to protect them. But these men could not be reformed by prison methods, could not be touched by unkindness or compulsion. Love is the only power that could reach them. I do not believe there is any human being, in prison or out, so depraved, so low, so bad, but that there is somebody in the world who could control him perfectly by love, by kindness, by patience. Many a man has been kept from performing a disgraceful, a criminal act by the thought that somebody loved him, believed in him, trusted him. Though thy sins be as scarlet, they shall be made whiter than snow. Love purifies, lifts up, regenerates. We are all familiar with its wonderful transforming power, how it erases the scars of sin, smooths out the wrinkles which vice has left in the face, softens the hard features and puts its own divine stamp there. We know how it changes the coarse, brutal, sinful man into its own divine likeness, how it brings the color back to the pale cheek, the luster to the dull eye, how it restores courage to the disheartened, hope to the distressed and the despairing. We know how it calls into the face a light which was never there before, and which is not of earth. In the remarkable play, The Passing of the Third Floor Back, we have a striking illustration of the subtle, silent force of the love motive. Those who have seen or read the play will remember how in response to an advertisement in a London paper, room to let, third floor back, comes a remarkable man, who is given the title of the Stranger. This man takes the third floor back, and finds himself in a boarding house filled with questionable characters, petty thieves, gamblers, people who have led fast lives, all sorts of uncharitable, envious men and women. They stoop to every kind of meanness. One woman even steals candles. Everyone tries to cheat everyone else and is cheated in return. The landlady is of the same type as her boarders. She preys on them and they prey on her. She waters the milk and adulterates the food. Then to keep herself from being robbed she puts everything under lock and key. The mere presence of the stranger seems antagonistic to the practices and low-flying ideals of the boarders and the landlady. They begin to make all sorts of fun of him. But he takes no notice. Instead he gives them kindness for unkindness, love for hate, and a pleasant smile as the only answer to their sarcastic, cutting remarks and innuendos. Gradually, as they become better acquainted, he begins to talk to them of themselves, to point out their good qualities, and to show them what great ability they have in certain lines, what wonderful things are possible to them. He told one of the young men who had made merry at his expense that he had a fine artistic temperament, and that he had in him the making of a great artist. He showed another his possibilities as a musician, and so on with every member of the discordant, jangling group, until each one finally came under the spell of his love and kindness. The little London slavey, or maid-of-all-work who was abused and constantly reminded that she had been in state prison and hence was a nobody, under the stranger's uplifting influence became a self-respecting, noble woman. The landlady, who had hitherto treated the girl like a slave, began to favor her and made her go outdoors and get a little change while she did the work. A man and wife who had lived a cat and dog life were brought together in harmony. All of the boarders, without exception, even those who had been the most brutal and selfish, gradually changed and became thoughtful, helpful and kindly toward one another. They became friends. The whole atmosphere of the house was changed. The stranger had shown every man and woman of them his or her better self, and in so doing had literally made them anew. Thus did one who typified the Christ spirit, a simple, quiet man who loved his fellow men and who found his greatest joy in serving others, manage to divert all of these people out of the crooked channels in which they had lived and into the right path toward happiness. Love, discovering to them these higher possible selves, transformed them. This is love's way. Love tames the fiercest animals. How quickly their wild, ferocious expression is replaced by a milder, softer, more gentle one under the kindly treatment of one who really loves them, one who looks upon them as did Saint Francis, as his little dumb brothers and sisters. The brute nature is gradually softened and distrust gives way to confidence. The suspicious look is replaced by a trustful one. Affection takes the place of dislike and fear, love goes out to meet love. Is there any more beautiful illustration in nature of the influence of love and kindly treatment than the evolution of our pet dogs from the ferocious wolf? Note the gentle, peaceful face of a cow or a horse which has been brought up as a family pet. Such animals would not step on or injure a child any more than we would ourselves. We love and trust them and they love and trust us in return. Love begets love. Some people mistake selfishness or self-love for real love. Everywhere we see the sort of base substitute which says, if you do this for me I'll do that for you. The woman that says to a man, in her heart, if not with her lips, if you'll support me and give me a home, I'll love you, does not love. This is selfishness. A great many people confuse love of the thing given with love of the giver. They mistake the love of their own comforts, of a good time, of dress and luxuries, for love of the person who supplies them with these things. This is a mere travesty of the genuine thing. Love simply loves and asks nothing in return. There is no self in it. Abuse, bitterness, indifference, ingratitude do not change or destroy love. It simply loves on. And no love is ever lost, whether it is returned or not. Genuine love is a force that always wins out. Even if it is not reciprocated, it wins by chastening, softening, elevating, beautifying and enriching the life of the one who loves. This is love's way. What mothers endure for many years for their children would kill them or drive them to an insane asylum in half the time but for love. This is the healing balm that cures all hurts, lightens all burdens, that takes the drudgery out of service. It is love alone that enables the poor mother to risk her life for her child, to go through terrible experiences in her struggles with poverty and sickness to rear her children. A burden half as great which had no love in it would crush the life out of her. But love lightens the load, takes the sting out of poverty, the pain out of sacrifice. The same thing is true of the loving father, though his burden in the nature of things is rarely as heavy as the mother's. But he is often virtually a slave for half a lifetime or more for those he loves, and if he is a real man he does not complain. Love lightens the burden and cheers the way. Where the heart is, there the burden is light. A new commandment give I unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you love ye also one another. In the literal fulfilling of this commandment lies the salvation of the world. Among the many noble souls of our own time who have tried to live in accordance with it, one of the most conspicuous was Count Leo Tolstoy. In one of his own beautiful stories, Tolstoy shows how every one, no matter what his station or how poor his circumstances, may do this, by following the master's example in treating every human being as we would a loved member of our own family. A very devout Russian peasant, so runs the story, had prayed for years that the master might sometime come to his humble cabin home. One night he had a vision in which the master appeared to him, and told him he would come to his cabin next day. Filled with joy, the peasant awoke. So real seemed his vision that he arose and immediately went to work putting his cabin to rights and preparing for the expected heavenly guest. A terrible storm of sleet and snow raged throughout the day. While performing his simple household duties, heaping fresh logs in his crude fireplace, preparing his pot of cabbage soup, the Russian peasant's daily dish, the man would look out into the storm with anxious, expectant eyes. Presently he saw a poor half-frozen peddler with a pack on his back struggling toward the light, but almost overcome by the fierce blasts of snow and sleet that beat upon him. The peasant rushed out and brought the wayfarer into his cabin. He dried his clothing, warmed him, fed him some of the cabbage soup, and started him on his way again, comforted and rejoicing. In a little while he saw another traveler, a poor old woman, trying feebly to beat her way against the blinding snow. Her also the compassionate peasant took into his cabin. He warmed and fed her, wrapped his own coat about her, and, strengthened and encouraged, sent her too on her way. The day wore slowly away and darkness approached, but still no sign of the master. Hoping against hope, the man went once again to his cabin door, and looking out into the storm he saw a little child, who was utterly unable to make its way against the blinding sleet and ice. He took the half-frozen child in his arms, brought it into the cabin, warmed and fed it, and soon the little wanderer fell asleep before the fire. Sorely disappointed because the master had not appeared, the peasant sat gazing into the fire, and as he gazed he fell asleep. Suddenly the room was radiant with a light that did not come from the fire, and there stood the master, white-robed, and serene, looking upon him with a smile. "Ah, master, I have waited and watched all this long day, but thou didst not come." The master replied, "3 times have I visited thy cabin today. The poor peddler whom thou rescued, warmed and fed, that was I, the poor woman to whom thou gavest thy coat, that was I, and this little child whom thou hast saved from the tempest, that is I, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, you have done it unto me." The Christ vision faded. The peasant awoke. He was alone with the child, who was smiling in its sleep. But he knew that the master had visited his cabin. The love of God. The love of God. I said, and at the words through all my being went a sudden shudder of light, the firmament not otherwise seems riven by the red jagged lightning flash that quivers overhead when for an instant heaven and earth are blent. So for a dazzling space my heart was rent, and I beheld, but all had fled. Had fled. Nor has returned, yet on my way along the pave or through the clanging mart, sometimes a stranger's I falls full on mine, you too. We have no speech, we make no sign, but something seems to pass from heart to heart, and I am full of gladness all that day. C. A. Price in Scribner's Magazine. 10. Where your supply is. He who dares assert the I, may calmly wait while hurrying fate meets his demand with sure supply. Helen Wilmans. Never affirm, or think about yourself, your prospects, your career, or your happiness what you do not wish to come true. Every child should be taught to expect success and happiness, to believe that the good things of the world are intended for him. We never can get more out of ourselves than we expect. If we expect large things, demand them. If we hold the large mental attitude toward our work, toward life, we shall get much greater results than if we depreciate ourselves, and look for only little things. That man who dares not assert the I, with undaunted assurance, with the conscious vigor and determination of one who believes in his divinity, will never do great things, because he will never make the demand that will draw sure supply. Before one can hope to win out in any undertaking he must be able to say, I, positively, with the force of conviction. He must polarize his mind to the positive attitude. This is the attitude that creates, that produces results in the world of matter as well as in the realm of spirit. The positive man is forceful because he has faith in himself. He forms his opinions without the aid of others and is not afraid to stand for what he thinks. He does not hesitate to differ with others. He is not a mush of concession, like the negative weakling who subscribes to what everyone he meets says, thinks or believes. He makes statements with positiveness, without hesitation. The Bible would never have gained such a dominating place in the life of the race had it referred to authorities to substantiate its statements, had it tried to prove its doctrines. Much of its supremacy has come from its tremendous positiveness, its vigorous affirmation of facts. You will find nothing negative or wishy-washy in the great book. Its assertions are imperious, positive, dogmatic. It is one perpetual hammering, driving home of truths, of great fundamental facts. The biblical writers speak with assurance and authority because of their profound conviction of the truths they utter. They do not argue or plead. They affirm. There is no appeal. As has been well said of the Bible, it never appeals to readers for confirmation. It states. Every line breathes dominance, superiority and confidence. We find the same imperious dominant qualities, the same positiveness in great leaders of men. They deal in affirmations. They throw themselves with intense conviction into whatever they attempt. They continually, both mentally and vocally, assert their power to do it, and, the result is a natural corollary, they succeed in what they attempt. The difference between the positive and the negative mind, the man who can assert the I with vigor and the man who cannot, is the difference between success and failure. The positive man keys his life to the I can note, the negative man to the I can't. The positive man denies the limitations of environment, of resources, of opportunities. He not only believes but knows that infinite bounty surrounds him, and that he can make it his own. The negative man, on the other hand, will not fight against environment, no matter how hard it may be, but will yield to it without a struggle. He sees limitations and difficulties everywhere. To him obstacles are insurmountable. But for the positive, dominant qualities in man we would still be living in caves and eating our food raw. It is the positive, forceful man that overcomes. Obstacles do not frighten, or turn him from his purpose. They are to him but the apparatus in the gymnasium, which give him additional strength and reinforce his determination to achieve. He knows that he can command infinite supply, that the great forces of the universe are working for him, and that he has only to direct them. He knows that it is his birthright to conquer, that the Creator put him here for that very purpose, to overcome, to grow, to ascend, to be godlike. Everyone has sufficient positive power to guide and direct his own life if he will only use and develop that power. If he does not use, he will lose. If you do not think and act for yourself, if you do not assert yourself and push your own way, the forces about you will take command and push you. And remember this: when you are pushed you go downhill, when you push yourself you go uphill. Everyone is either pusher or pushed in this world. Even the kingdom of heaven is taken by violence. He who would attain it must be aggressive for truth. No namby-pamby weakling who is afraid to stand on his own feet and fight for the right can get there. If you ever expect to do anything to justify your existence, quit looking for some outside agent which will move your life train. Your power is coiled up right inside of you. There is where your engine is. The name of that engine is I. Use the great force at your command. Get up steam and forge ahead. You will never get very far by any other means. You are only losing time in trying to get any power outside of yourself, impulse or influence, to move you forward. When the Creator made you a co-partner in His work, He put inside of you all the machinery necessary for the part you were to play. Claim what He intended for you. Develop and use your machinery, and no power on earth can hold you back from the goal you set for yourself. Say to yourself, it is my duty to make good, to obey that inner urge, that ambition prod which ever bids me up and on. I am resolved never again to allow anything to interfere with the free and untrammeled exercise of my physical and mental faculties. I will unfold all the possibilities that the Creator has enfolded in the ego, the I of me. There is no lost day in God's calendar, no allowance for waste, and I am determined henceforth to make the most of the stuff that has been given me, to play the part of a son of omnipotence. As a matter of fact, every day has a splendid possible prize awaiting every human being, a prize which no money can buy. It can be obtained only at the price of splendid effort and self-assertion. We are too timid, too fearful of results even to attempt what we long to do. And we are too easy with ourselves, too willing to drift with the tide of our moods. Every man who has ever achieved grandly has been a stern schoolmaster to himself. He has incessantly affirmed his ideal and held himself unwaveringly to its realization. By cultivating the positive we drive out the negative. This is a psychological law. It is to empty by filling. Affirmation is always more potent than negation. Professor Halleck says, by restraining of an emotion, we can frequently throttle it, by inducing an expression, we can often cause its allied emotions. Professor William James makes a similar statement. Refuse to express a passion, he says, and it dies. Count 10 before venting your anger and its occasion seems ridiculous. Whistling to keep up courage is no mere figure of speech. On the other hand, sit all day in a moping posture, sigh, and reply to everything with a dismal voice, and your melancholy lingers. There is no more valuable precept in moral education than this, as all of us who have experienced know. If we wish to conquer undesirable emotional tendencies in ourselves, we must assiduously, and in the first instance cold-bloodedly, go through the outward movements of those contrary dispositions which we wish to cultivate. Smooth the brow, brighten the eye, contract the dorsal rather than the ventral aspect of the frame, and speak in a major key, pass the genial compliment, and your heart must indeed be frigid if it does not gradually thaw. Few of us realize the tremendous force there is in the vigorous, incessant affirmation of conditions which we long to establish. United with the visualizing of the man or woman we yearn to be or the thing we are determined to achieve, it becomes an irresistible power in shaping events. Act the part, affirm the possession, the assured realization of the thing desired, and it will tend to materialize. This is a fundamental law of creation. What is called autosuggestion, or self-suggestion, is one of the most active agencies employed in mind building. We can literally make our minds, thought by thought, as we can our bodies, fiber by fiber, through vigorous affirmation. There is a mysterious power in the spoken word which gets a greater hold upon us than simply passing the same word through the mind or looking at it on the printed page. The vocal expression of a thought makes a greater impression upon the memory and especially influences the subconscious mind. It works like a leaven in the whole nature, putting agents in motion that establish a connection between us and our desires, the objects for which we are working. The persistent affirmation of our ability to do that which we have undertaken in a superb, kingly fashion, is a great stimulus, a positive, creative force. There is nothing more helpful in building a strong positive character than bracing yourself up by searching, heart-to-heart talks with yourself. In this way, better perhaps than in any other, you can take stock of your mental assets and improve yourself all along the line. If you are timid, for instance, or even feel that you are something of a coward, stoutly deny it. Insist that you are no shirker, no coward, that you are brave even to daring. Boldly assume the quality of a hero, vehemently affirm that you actually possess invincible courage, and you will be surprised at your immediate increase of strength and positiveness. Deny that you have any weakness, defect or deficiency which can handicap your career. Insist upon affirming the opposite quality, the winning quality. If you lack decision, if you are a waverer, a vacillator, if you are a putter off of things, if procrastination runs in your blood, persistently affirm that you possess the opposite qualities. At the same time resolve that you are going not only to play the heroic part in life, that you are not only going to begin work upon the duty awaiting you, but that you are going to put it through, that you are going to do things, and that you will never again allow yourself to waver, to procrastinate in the smallest matter, even if you do make mistakes now and then. Better make a mistake and forge ahead than to remain negative and inactive. The habit of vigorous affirmation is the habit of victory. But remember that action must follow on the heels of resolution or you will never go any farther. Affirmation and resolution without prompt endeavor for realization are worse than useless. It is the man of action, of continued and repeated action, the man who never acknowledges defeat who ultimately wins out. During our Civil War the Southern generals said it didn't do any good to beat Grant, because he never knew when he was beaten and, consequently, wouldn't stay beaten. Men who leave their mark on the world are men of iron resolution, of grim determination. If youth were only taught at home and in school the power of an inflexible resolve, an inexorable affirmation of the thing they are determined to accomplish, if they were only taught the invincibleness of an unshakable will, of the positive victorious mental attitude, of a resolve which knows no defeat, life would not be half so hard. Nerve us with incessant affirmatives. Don't bark against the bad, but chant the beauties of the good. The positive, creative, affirmative elements are our friends. They draw us our sure supply. All negatives are our enemies. They drive away supply. Affirm the good, never the bad, the bright, never the dark, the true, and never the false, harmony, never discord. We should never forget that whatever tends to optimism is ready to give us a lift. The first step toward a happy, successful life is to get control of the supply that is ready to flow in answer to our demand. This you can do by forming the habit of affirming that the best will come to you, that only the things that are good for you can come into your life. Don't let yourself slip into the foolish habit of anticipating trouble, misfortune, sickness, disaster, accidents. To anticipate or expect such things is to affirm their reality and draw them to you. The habit of anticipating them will get them into the habit of arriving. You will thus be drawn into a current of circumstance corresponding to the character of your negative thought. Put yourself into a positive, success and happiness attitude the first thing every morning by taking time, even if only a few minutes, to commune with the Creator. Get into tune with the Infinite, the source of your strength, the moment you awake. Keep yourself in harmony with the principle which underlies your being during the day, and your every act will be a step forward on the desired road. Say to yourself constantly, happiness is my birthright. I was made to exult in life, not to go about with a long, sad, dejected face as though it had been a bitter disappointment, as though I were a misfit in the world. I was made to radiate joy and gladness and to go through life as a conqueror. If I am indeed a child of the Creator, and I know that I am, it is a positive insult to him to go through the world as though I were a beggar, a slave. I bear the image of the King of Kings, and it is my business to make all men see the likeness. It is my duty to prove my divine heritage by radiating royal manhood. I know of no practice which will do more for one's growth and life enlargement than the habit of rising above one's moods and discouragements through perpetual affirmation of one's divinity. If, for example, you get up in the morning feeling negative, blue and discouraged, if you don't feel like working at anything, just go off alone and have a good heart-to-heart talk with yourself, something like this: "Now, look here, young man, or young woman, none of this. You are going to do a grand day's work today. You are going to get right out of this condition. You have had enough of it." If you are a real man, or woman, you will rise above your mood and wring victory out of this day, even though it looks so unpromising. It does not matter what comes or what goes, what happens or what does not happen. There is one thing I am sure of, and that is, I am going to be positive, creative, to get the most possible out of today. I am not going to allow anything to rob me of my happiness, or of my right to live this day through from beginning to end, and not merely to exist. I do not care what comes. I shall not allow any annoyance, any happening, any circumstance which may cross my path to rob me of my power and peace of mind. I will not be unhappy today, no matter what occurs. I am going to enjoy it to its fullest capacity. This shall be a complete day in my life. I shall not allow the enemies of my happiness to mar it. No misfortune in the past, nothing which has happened to me in days gone by, which has been disagreeable or tragic, no enemies of my efficiency, shall be guests in my spirit's sacred enclosure today. Only happy thoughts, joy thoughts, friend thoughts shall find entertainment in my soul this day. No negative thoughts, none of my enemies shall gain admittance to scrawl their hideous autographs on the walls of my mind. There shall be no admittance today, except to the friends of my best moods. I will tear down all black, sable pictures and hang in their place pictures of joy and gladness, of things which will encourage, cheer, and increase my power. Everything which ever handicapped my life, which has made me uncomfortable and unhappy, shall be expelled from my mental kingdom this day and every coming day. If you make a resolve like this every morning and live up to it during the day, you cannot help being positive, productive, creative. The positive mind repels all thought enemies that would hinder progress. Doubt, fear, despair, worry, these have no place in the creative brain. They are products of the negative mind. The man who would bend circumstances to his will cannot afford to harbor them. Hold negative, despondent, discouraged thoughts and your surroundings will be negative, unpropitious. Hold positive, confident, hopeful, cheerful thoughts and a congenial environment will manifest itself. It is wonderful what right thinking can accomplish even in a naturally weak, negative mind. The insistent and persistent holding of the positive thought, the assurance thought, the self-confidence, the self-faith thought, the determined effort to think and act for oneself, to direct one's own forces will gradually change a negative non-productive mentality into a positive, creative one. I have known very timid, sensitive people who scarcely dared to say their souls were their own before others, to so cure their habit of self-effacement and so strengthen their weak self-confidence by constant audible affirmation of their own strength, that in a very few months they had largely overcome this weakness. Fear is negative, courage is positive, affirmative. If we would make our lives effective, we must root out all of the things which keep us in discord, all negative elements, and give ourselves over to the power of affirmation. Many a person has ruined his life effort by depreciating it and sending out to those about him the negative vibration of his inferiority. We radiate our faith, our confidence in ourselves or our doubts and distrust. Others catch the contagion of our opinion of ourselves. Whatever you do, don't set up in your own mind and in that of others a picture of yourself as a weak, ineffective, negative personality. People do not realize the harm they do by making uncomplimentary and unfavorable remarks about themselves. It does not matter what it may be, the assertion of anything unfavorable to us or unlike what we wish to be is injurious. How often we hear men and women say, "I never can remember anything. I am always forgetting umbrellas and packages. I never can remember names or faces," and similar negative, depreciatory remarks. It never occurs to them that by making such statements as these they are strengthening their defects. They are not aware that by impressing these unfortunate images of themselves upon their mental mirror they are seriously injuring their self-confidence, their ultimate chance of being what they would like to be or of getting what they desire. The character of civilization would be radically changed in a short time if parents were to teach their children the wonderful, strengthening, character-building power in the habit of affirmation. If boys and girls were impressed with the truth that the constant affirming of the good, the beautiful and the true, the insistent holding of the ideal of themselves as they would like to be, is a real creative force that tends to actualize what they long for, many of the problems of the race would be solved. As a matter of fact, the worst enemy, as well as the best friend, any human being ever has is inside of him. The very mental attitude of the majority of people is utterly antagonistic to their advancement. A really brainy professional man whom I meet quite often is a striking example of the baneful effects of the negative self-depreciatory thought. He wanted to do something big in his line, but he has had only mediocre success, and in consequence has so soured on life that he seems to have lost the power to enjoy himself. The truth is, the early contracted habit of self-castigation and unfavorable comparison with others who were more fortunate at the start has stayed by him through the years and practically disqualified his mind for real enjoyment or for making the most of his talents. Another negative character of this type is a man in commercial life who is forever recalling his lack of opportunities. He never tires of referring to the fact that he was handicapped at his very birth by a slovenly slipshod father, and that all through life he has been placed at a great disadvantage compared with other men. He believes, and constantly affirms, that he is unlucky, that he has never been at the right spot at the right time, that no matter how hard he works he feels a mysterious something holding him back. Some malignant fate, or destiny, he complains, is always tripping him up, thwarting his most strenuous efforts, overturning his best laid plans. Through its machinations, although he has worked harder than anybody else he knows, he and his family have remained in poverty, while his associates have become prosperous. The cause of this man's failure is not far to seek. It is plain that he started wrong and has been going wrong ever since. He has been talking failure all his life, affirming hard times, poverty, ill luck, and disappointment. He has been sowing thistles and all sorts of ill weeds in his garden, and yet he wonders why his harvests have been so stingy, so blighted and overshadowed by weeds. Affirmations, acts, motives, ambitions, mental attitudes are the seeds sown in human gardens. Their character determines what our harvests shall be. Our future reaping depends entirely on our past sowing. What we are enjoying or suffering today is the result of yesterday's sowing. We are reaping weeds, thistles, thorns, or beautiful flowers and luscious fruit, according to the seeds we have sown. The only soil in which our good seed thoughts will flourish is that of mental harmony. In this fruitful ground lies the secret of all efficiency and happiness. To come into unity with the author of our being is to realize perfect mental harmony. And this is the first requisite of an efficient life, a goal that can be reached only by the road of constant, unfailing affirmation. When you long for something that it is perfectly legitimate for you to have, sow your affirmation seed in perfect confidence that it will bloom in reality. Say to yourself, "Our Father Mother God is no respecter of persons. He is not partial in his treatment of his children. They all have the same rights, the same privileges. He will give me through my own effort what I need, what I ask for. The poorest, most ragged wretch that crawls has just as many hours in his day as has the ermined king. I can and I will do what I long to do. I will be what I desire to be. Affirm this again and again to yourself. Do not wait for an opportunity, make your opportunity. The power of affirmation will work miracles for you. Most people seem to think that if they were only in an ideal environment, without worry or anxiety regarding the living-getting problem, if they were free from pain and in vigorous health, they would then be perfectly happy. But, as a matter of fact, we are not half so dependent for happiness upon environment, upon circumstances, as we imagine we are. False ambition, envy and jealousy are responsible for much of our uneasiness, our restlessness and discontent. Our minds are so intent upon what other people have and are doing that we do not get a tithe of the enjoyment and satisfaction out of our own work, out of our own possessions, that they should afford us. We think so much about what others have and spend so much time wondering why we cannot have similar things that we do not see the beauty, loveliness, and sweetness in our own environment. We question and envy when we should affirm and realize. We neglect the most potent means within our grasp, the miracle-working power of affirmation. The supply will come in answer to our demand. Every one of us has an inalienable right to be comfortable, prosperous, free from anxiety, in short to be happy. Man was not intended to be a worrying machine. The fundamental principle of the human constitution is based on harmony and, when we are in harmonious relations with the universe, we attain the maximum of efficiency, of power, of usefulness to the world. It is then we get the maximum of enjoyment and happiness out of life. Is it not worthwhile to get into such relations? Is it not foolish to remain in discord when by the simple process of affirmation, linked with divine faith and effort, we can transform ourselves and our environment? 11. The triumph of health ideals. What is the body after all but the spirit breaking through the flesh, or health but beauty in the organism? Every good emotion makes a health and life-promoting change in the body. Every thought is registered in the brain by a physical change more or less permanent in the tissue cells. The coming man will find it as easy to counteract an unfriendly, vicious thought by turning on the counter thought to neutralize it, as to rob the hot water of its burning power by turning on the cold water faucet. There is a divine something in man which never was sick and never can be, that divine self, the image of the Creator, perfect, unchangeable, indestructible, immortal, and which sometime and somewhere must drive out all trace of sin, disease and death in mankind. Hufeland. Even those who do not believe in Christian Science as a whole must be impressed with the scientists' wonderful religious optimism. Their inspiring mental attitude, the hopeful way in which they face life, always looking toward the light, toward health, toward prosperity, toward success, and turning their backs upon the darkness, upon everything which can mar their health, their efficiency, their happiness, is creating a new world for thousands of discouraged souls. Christian scientists insist that since God has created everything that is, and since He is perfect, is all in all, He could not possibly create anything unlike Himself, such as disease, or anything else which is not good for His children. God is harmony, they reason, and He could not create discord. He is truth and He could not create error. God is love and He could not create the opposite of love, hatred, jealousy, envy, selfishness, any evil emotion or passion. Hence all disease, all discord, all the enemies of the race, all satanic influences in the world must be accounted for in some other way than as decrees of His will, for perfection could not have produced these imperfections. Love could not create anything antagonistic to itself. Scientists take a positive and vigorous stand against the admission to their mind of any of the enemies of their health, their prosperity, their happiness, or their destiny. Not only is all thought of failure and poverty banished, but they close the portals of their mind against fear, worry, and anxiety, against the ravages of jealousy, the poison of hatred, envy, and selfishness. They try to keep their mental realm clear of all black, forbidding pictures, of all sorts of distressing emotions and unfriendly thoughts, while they open it wide to the things which help, inspire and bring hope, the friend thoughts and emotions, joy, gladness, love, truth, and divine inspiration. They believe that all human beings were not only made to be healthy but also to be happy, successful, prosperous. They regard poverty, no less than illness, as a mental disease, to be treated in the same manner as bodily disease, and this cheerful religious optimism which they try steadily to maintain is not alone a healing force, but is also a great disease-resisting power. Health, wholeness, is one of the most important and necessary factors for the attainment of those things which every normal human being desires: peace, power, plenty, success and happiness. The scientist's religious optimism is a potent force for placing the mind in the most favorable condition for the attainment of all these things. It removes all hindrances to full, complete self-expression. It is just as necessary to hold the victorious attitude toward health as it is to hold the victorious attitude toward our career and everything which affects it. It is just as necessary to get rid of our doubts and fears regarding our physical well-being, as it is to get rid of our doubts and fears regarding our ability to succeed. If we would be strong and vigorous, it is quite as important to visualize health, to hold the health ideal, to keep the perfect health picture constantly in the mind, as it is to keep the prosperity, the success ideal in the mind when we are striving for an independence. The habit of always holding a high ideal of our health, of thinking of ourselves as well, vigorous, physically and mentally perfect, will go very far toward building up a strong disease-resisting barrier between ourselves and all our health enemies. On the other hand, people who never think of themselves as whole, healthy, active and robust, but who constantly hold in mind a picture of themselves as weak, ailing, without vim or stamina, with little or no disease-resisting power, are liable at any time to become victims of disease. The building up of a strong health thought barrier, a vigorous health conviction between ourselves and disease is the best sort of health insurance. Fearing disease, thinking ill health, visualizing physical suffering, is the surest way of attracting those things. Physicians know that the awful incubus of doubt and worry in the minds of patients, the fear that their disease may be fatal, is the greatest obstacle to their recovery. We head toward our doubts, our fears, our convictions regarding our health, just as we do toward our doubts, fears, and convictions regarding other things. If we are convinced that we are not going to be strong, rugged, virile, if we fear that we are likely to develop inherited weaknesses and disease tendencies, we are headed toward these conditions, and will probably realize them. On the contrary, if we hold the victorious attitude toward health, if we visualize the health ideal, the health conviction, we head mentally toward health, and what we head toward mentally is the pattern of that which is continually being built into our life structure. A healthy body is healthy thought externalized. Man's normal condition is that of robust health, vigorous vitality, tremendous power of endurance. The Creator evidently intended the human machine to run harmoniously, without friction, without weakness or disability of any kind. The created is a part of the Creator, an indestructible part of Him. When we rise to a full consciousness of this, we shall be victors over disease instead of victims of it, we shall be conquerors instead of slaves of conditions. Nearly a century ago a celebrated German physician said that there is something in man which was never born, is never sick and never dies, and that it is this something, this omnipotent force within which in reality heals our diseases. No matter what we may call it, this something that repairs and renews is one with the force that creates us. We may name it variously: the God principle, the Christ within us, the divine principle, the omnipotent force, or anything else we please. The name does not matter. All mean the same thing, that is, the creative, the all-sustaining force that holds the universe in harmony. There is something in you that is lord over your physical organs. There is a power in you, back of the flesh, but not of it, which dominates the flesh, and that is the real you. Your partner in that power is the intelligence that created you. You are indissolubly interlinked with that intelligence. You can no more be wiped out of existence than the Creator who made you, because you are an immortal expression of Himself. You are His masterpiece, and His work must partake of His qualities, of His perfection, of His omnipotence, of His omniscience. The trouble with us is we do not rise to the power and dignity of our divinity. We do not half believe we are divine. We have a sort of vague theory that we are mere puppets, thrown off as separate units into space, without any vital connection with the power that gave us life. This false theory is the cause of our sufferings. The reason why we are such shriveled, scrub oaks of human beings is found in the dried up, mean, stingy ideal of ourselves which we have been taught to hold. We have been reared to think of ourselves as poor miserable worms of the dust, unworthy to come into the presence of our Father Mother God, even though we are fashioned in His image. Instead of carrying through life an ideal of our mental and physical perfection, we carry an ideal of a defective, diseased, physically and mentally imperfect, being. The mind being the molder of the body, the life-giving processes within us build the sort of body that answers to the model in the mind, the ideal which we hold of ourselves. What we really believe ourselves to be, we tend to become. We keep our minds filled with all sorts of discordant, sick pictures, and of course all of these mental images reappear in the body, react upon the life. On the other hand, every time we affirm that we are one with the creative force of the universe, that nothing can separate us from our oneness with the One, we tend to build our bodies into the ideal state of perfect health, mental, physical, and moral wholeness. If we could hold continually the ideal of our wholeness, and visualize ourselves as perfect beings, even as He is perfect, and constantly try to live up to our ideal, any tendency to imperfection, to discord, to disease would be eliminated. We are only just beginning to realize the tremendous import of the idea that we really fashion our bodies to correspond with our thoughts, that we are co-creators of ourselves with the divine power which is back of the flesh, but not of it. A prominent surgeon in speaking of infantile paralysis says that the physician's mental attitude toward it has a great deal to do with its cure, and that he should hold firmly in mind the idea that the disease is curable. Every physician should also be a metaphysician. He should be a profound believer in the principle that the power which created the patient can recreate him, can repair damages, restore diseased or lost tissues. The most advanced physicians do believe that at best they can but help nature in her healing processes. They realize that the same power which created the patient is present in the healing of every wound, every broken bone and every hurt we suffer. The surgeon sets the bone, dresses the wound, but the same power that first created the flesh and bone must do the healing. The mental healer vigorously denies the reality of disease in the sense that truth is a reality. To him all is infinite mind, and its infinite manifestation, as Mrs. Eddy says, and therefore all must be good. Only the good can be real as God made all that is. The persistent denial that anything could exist which the Creator did not create, and that He could make anything unlike Himself, is one of the fundamental principles of the Christian Science faith. To the healer health is a vital, immortal principle, the everlasting fact, and disease, although it seems painfully real to the sufferer, is but a false belief. The healer holds in mind only what he desires to establish in his patient's mind. He shuts out everything else. Health is what he wishes to establish, and to do this he holds insistently and tenaciously the health ideal. He refuses to see the sick, diseased man or woman, and persists in visualizing the ideal one that God intended. To him the defective, deficient, suffering being which disease and physical discord have made is not the real man or woman. That being is only a travesty of the ideal, perfect creature the Creator planned. He does not allow himself to think of, or to picture disease symptoms. To visualize the physical appearance of disease would be to acknowledge its reality, and this would be to defeat his healing. He could not, for example, cure cancer or tuberculosis while mentally picturing the horrible symptoms of these diseases. He wishes to keep all such things out of his mind because of their baleful suggestiveness. Visualizing them would merely etch their reality deeper and deeper in his consciousness, and the suggestion would be conveyed into the patient's consciousness. The mental healer's aim is to produce in the mind of the person he is treating a consciousness of the scientific reality of health, and of the unreality of disease. It does not matter how the disease symptoms may contradict this principle, or how loudly pain may scream for recognition, he persists in considering disease unreal and in holding the scientific sense of health as the reality. He relies wholly upon divine mind as the great healing potency, and steadily affirms his patient's oneness with his divine source, and that disease cannot exist in the divine presence. At the very outset he encourages his patient by affirming that, however real his physical discord or disease may seem to him, it cannot affect the God image in him, because that is perfect, as God himself is perfect, and that in reality there can be no disease. Truth and harmony, he asserts, are the great facts of life. Error is not a reality, but merely the absence of truth. Discord is not a reality, but merely the absence of harmony. He assures him that he is God's child, and that God's image cannot be sick, distressed or diseased. Of course, he says, this seems very real to you, painfully real, but it is not reality in the sense that truth is a reality. This is discord, the absence of harmony, and divine harmony will antidote all discord just as truth will neutralize error, and as love will neutralize all hatred, jealousy or revenge, or as confidence, self-assurance will neutralize fear, doubt, or self-depreciation. The healer holds continually the healing suggestions, and concentrates on arousing in his patient expectancy of relief by bracing his hope, confidence, assurance and faith in divine mind that restores, renews and heals. He tries to stimulate and to put into active operation the healing potencies latent in him, to awaken in his mind the lost divine image, and to impress upon him the idea that this divine image cannot possibly be dominated or in any way affected by disease. I have seen a chemist pour a few drops of liquid from different crucibles into a jar of muddy water, and in a few minutes the mud would disappear and the water be as pure as crystal. This is in effect what the mental healer does in treating a patient. No matter what the disease is, his great remedy lies in mental chemistry, in neutralizing, destroying the error with its natural antidote. The healer's constant affirmation that there can be no sickness, no disease in God's image in man, is a powerful suggestion which tends to weaken the grip of error in his patient's body. The very shutting out of all fear, of the terror of disease and death, is a great step towards a cure, because these things are depressing to all the bodily functions. Everything that discourages, that makes the patient despondent, is a great devitalizer, and constantly lowers his disease-resisting power. The arousing of the belief that the healer is a sort of motorman who puts up the patient's dropped trolley pole, thus making connection with the wire carrying infinite power, or that he is a wireless operator who is connecting him with his divine source, the source of health and happiness, and that he is actually receiving the flow of divine force, of peace, of immortal life, is of itself a tremendous healing agency. When he has succeeded in establishing in the mind of his patient the vigorous conviction that health is the everlasting principle, the great fundamental inviolable fact, the healer has gone far toward establishing a scientific consciousness of health, and has laid a most important health foundation. After a little practice, a sick person can do wonderful things for himself through the vitalizing force of autosuggestion. He can be his own physician. He can recover health and keep it by applying to himself the same principles that the healer applies to his patient. In this way he can keep himself in conscious union with the divine source of all supply, of all good, all health. There are sufficient latent potencies in every human being, if he would only arouse and make them operative, to keep him in health and harmony. We can all be our own healers if we will. The stream must be as pure as its fountain head unless contaminated later, and there is where we humans come in. We contaminate the health stream with our thought poisons. Our doubts, our fears, our unbeliefs, our brutal passions, our selfishness, our greed, our hatreds, our jealousies, our revenge, our ingratitude for life, for the blessings we enjoy, all of these things tend to pollute the stream which we receive pure as it flows from the crystal fountain, the divine source of the all-good. But the practice of divine chemistry will enable us to clear up our muddy life streams. We have in ourselves the remedies which will neutralize the vicious poisons we have allowed to flow into and befoul our life stream. We can by the right use of our powers purify it as the chemist purified the jar of muddy water. By right thinking we can neutralize the poison sewage of our bodies, just as chemists can take the foul sewage water which flows out from a city and by the help of chemicals neutralize all the filth, making it absolutely pure again. By applying their antidotes we can neutralize the poisons of disease, the results of wrong thinking and living, which sap and embitter our lives, which make us suffer from all sorts of ills and leave us unable to accomplish 1/10 of what we might if we had that splendid physical and mental vigor which is normal to humanity. We must offer the same uncompromising opposition to the reality of all kinds of disease, mental and physical, that the mental healer does. We must see ourselves as he sees his patient, in the wholeness, the completeness, the Creator intended. It is the ideal man or woman we must visualize, never the one weakened, deformed by horrible diseases or their symptoms. By recognizing only the real man or woman, unaffected by wrong thinking, we cut off the vicious effects of the mental enemies which are fighting to perpetuate disease or other unfortunate conditions. The constant holding of the health ideal, of the truth thought, the health and prosperity thought, the optimistic thought, the kindly, cheerful, helpful thought and the shutting out of all their opposites, not only help to restore health, but also increase tremendously the disease-resisting power. Right thought is a health, efficiency, and happiness tonic. The vital thing in establishing health is to adopt the victorious attitude toward it as toward every other good thing we desire. If we wish to have abounding health, and who does not, we must cultivate implicit faith in health as our birthright, in the truth that, being the children of perfection, we must partake of the qualities of perfection, and hence be free from the imperfection of disease or sickness. Without faith in our wholeness we are not, and cannot be, whole. Without faith in the healing power of divine chemistry no healing is possible either by patient or healer. The patient may not always have a conscious faith, but the healer has, and a similar faith is aroused in the patient later, as he begins to feel the divine healing power operating and working like a leaven in his nature. There is no one thing that is emphasized so much in the Bible, and especially in Christ's teachings as faith. Every benefit, every healing depends for its efficacy on the sufferer's faith. In all of his healing this one condition of faith was imperative, according to thy faith be it unto thee. When the disciples told their master that they could not heal certain cases he rebuked them, and told them that they failed because of their lack of faith. According to thy faith be it unto thee, he reiterated constantly. He recognized the great healing power of faith, and impressed upon his followers the truth, that without it no healing was possible. Every physician knows that his patient's faith in his power to cure him, in the efficacy of the remedies he applies, are curative agencies. Faith in medicinal remedies is what makes them effective. It is faith that furnishes the potency of thousands of so-called remedies, which have no intrinsic value whatever. We all know how the visualizing of disease and the fear of it affect the mind in undermining the health ideal. Confidence in our health is really its sustaining and buttressing power, for the moment we destroy this we lessen our resisting power and invite disease. The image perpetually held in the conscious mind becomes indelibly etched in the subconscious mind and the body conforms to the thought. To attain perfect health we must hold the image of physical perfection, we must constantly keep in mind this ideal state. We must build ourselves thought pictures of a superb body in all its strength and wholeness. We must relentlessly strangle every image of weakness or disease, every sick suggestion that would blur the picture of perfect wholeness and harmony into which we wish to grow. What a revolution we would make in our lives if we could only learn to live this health ideal instead of its opposite, the disease ideal. Every child should be reared to think health instead of disease, should be made to realize that health is the everlasting fact, that disease is not a necessary evil, and was not intended for us, that it was not intended we should suffer. If the young mind were saturated from infancy with health ideas and ideals it would build up a strong disease-resisting power that would make it immune to all health enemies. If every child were trained to believe that he was a god in the making, that he had within him the embryo of divinity which ought to develop into a godlike being, we should not have so many mental and physical Lilliputians. One of our great health troubles lies in the fact that we have been accustomed from childhood to lay too much emphasis on matter, on the support of the body. As a matter of fact, the mind is everything. But mind is not confined to the head alone. We are all mind. We think all over. We live all over. Our sensations are the intelligent expression of all the cells of the body. The body is a great cooperative institution composed of billions of cells. Some of these cells have a higher functioning quality than others, but they all have their appointed places. Every cell is an important member of the body corporation and has a voice in the government of the whole. When we are wounded or diseased, for instance, billions of these tiny cell repairers, healers, renewers, health builders, rush instantly to the wounded part to repair and restore the injured tissues. We are all conscious that there is continually going on within us these repairing, renewing, reinvigorating, as well as healing, processes. We feel that there is a marvelous and beneficent intelligence ever working miracles within us, a power which heals our wounds and cures our hurts. Whence comes the intelligence which governs and directs the work of these little builders and repairers? It comes from the within of us, for our objective mind is comparatively passive in the process. But the great intelligence back of the flesh, which keeps the heart beating, the lungs breathing, and all of the various bodily functions in activity, never ceases working, and never leaves us for an instant. It permeates every atom of the body, illuminating each separate cell with a reflection of its own light. Scientists are making marvelous discoveries regarding the location of the seat of intelligence, mind. Until recently it was supposed to be confined solely to the brain. But now we know the mind, the brain, or the thinking part of us, extends the entire length of the spinal cord, that there is gray brain matter everywhere in the sympathetic nervous system. In fact, recent experiments indicate selective power in the cells all through the body. Regular gray matter has been found in the fingertips of deaf, dumb and blind people, thus showing that wherever there is a need there is intelligence. We know what marvels blind and deaf mutes perform by their sense of touch, in distinguishing colors, even fine variations of shades in delicate fabrics, in correctly sensing denominations of paper money and coins, and accurately describing statues and other forms from merely running their fingers over them. This shows that intelligence is everywhere in the body. Some of our foremost scientists now believe that the cells composing each organ form a sort of cooperative community intelligence which presides over that particular organ. They hold that the bodily organs have what may be termed minds of their own, and are vitally connected with the so-called spinal column brain and the solar plexus brain, as well as with the brain proper. This theory is borne out in fact. We know how quickly the stomach sympathizes with the mental attitude, how it responds to our thoughts, our emotions, also how quickly the heart, the kidneys respond to our mental states, fear, worry, joy, anxiety, love, hate, jealousy, whatever emotion dominates us. If there were not a very intimate connection between the brain and the stomach, and the same principle applies to the heart, the kidneys and other organs, the digestion would not be affected so seriously by our changing moods and emotions. Inasmuch as it is so affected, is it not reasonable to assume that the stomach cells are influenced by the thought which you project into them? Is it not reasonable to assume that by sending into these cells black, gloomy, discouraging pictures of indigestion and dyspepsia you injuriously affect them? If these cells have intelligence, and if they respond instantly to our different mental states, as we know they do, isn't it natural that they should be correspondingly affected by our opinion of them, by our lack of confidence in them, our suspicion of their ability to digest our food properly, by our constant complaining of our stomach and our miserable digestive apparatus? Give a dog a bad name and you might as well kill him, is an old saying. In the same way, impress, force home on your stomach, your heart, your liver, or any other bodily organ the conviction that it is inefficient, weak, good for nothing, and in addition swallow a mouthful of mental dyspepsia with every mouthful of food, and, sooner or later, it will accept your verdict and be just what you claim it is. In other words, instead of handicapping them by wrong thought, we must give our bodily organs a fair chance to do their legitimate work. If we expect them to act perfectly, as the Creator intended they should, we must treat them as we would treat our children. We must by right thinking help them to be normal instead of making them abnormal by doubting, being suspicious of them. We must visualize them as our co-workers, our partners, our friends, not as our enemies, our tormentors. Just think of the horrible pictures of their various organs people get from medical books, which describe minutely symptoms of diseases which they imagine they have. Many people never visualize a normal picture of themselves. They never think of themselves as the perfect beings God intended them to be. What they hold constantly in mind is a picture of an abnormal, diseased, weak, defective creature. They picture their stomach, their liver, their kidneys, their heart in a diseased, imperfect condition. Instead of regarding them as friends, as members of the same family, they look on them as malicious enemies who cause them constant suffering. Oh, they cry out, "I've got such a miserable stomach. I can't eat anything. Everything I eat hurts me. My treacherous old heart, how it pumps. I can't walk or do any of the things I like because of it. My liver is all upset. I seem to be out of kilter everywhere. My kidneys are affected, my back troubles me, and really I might as well be dead." Such horrible visualizing and belittling of the hard-working bodily organs would ruin the health of the best trained athlete. If you would be a friend to yourself, you must be a friend of your organs, which are so intimately and sympathetically connected with your brain-mind, the central station of your body. You must believe in their perfection, in their normal functioning. You must picture them trying to help you to carry out your great life purpose instead of working at cross purposes with you. You must have confidence in them, think of them as your friends instead of enemies handicapping your success and ruining your chances in life. Replace the pictures of diseased organs with their opposites, pictures of their wholeness, their completeness, their soundness, and you will find yourself coming into health and power. Assume the victorious attitude, and think of yourself as an absolutely perfect being, divine, immortal, possessing superb health, a magnificent physique, a vigorous constitution, a sublime mind. Every morning when you rise, before you go to bed at night, and whenever you think of it during the day, stoutly affirm the fact of your perfection physically, mentally, and morally. Constantly assert mentally, and, when alone, orally, "I am health because I am of God. God is my life, He is the great creative power that sustains and upholds me every instant. This power is perpetually recreating me, and trying to keep me up to the ideal, the original plan of my being when I was created. I shall cooperate with it today, and every day. I shall aim to be perfect, even as my Father." There is a great restorative power in the mere resolve to be well, strong and vigorous, in affirming and tenaciously holding the perfect ideal of ourselves which the Creator had in His plan of us. There is a recreative force in the realization that any departure from this ideal means departure from God, from perfect health, from the reality of the perfect physical, mental and moral being planned by Him. You will be surprised to see how this mental attitude, this visualized physical ideal, will be reproduced in the body. The mind is the body builder, the great health sculptor, and we cannot surpass our mental model. If there is a weakness or flaw in the thought model, there will be corresponding deficiencies in the health statue. As long as we think ill health, doubt our ability to be strong and vigorous, as long as we hold the conviction of the presence of inherited weaknesses and disease tendencies, look upon ourselves as victims instead of conquerors of ill health, in short, as long as the mental model is defective, perfect health is impossible. Joyous, abounding health can be established just as anything else can be established, by right thinking and right living, by thinking health instead of disease, thinking strength instead of weakness, harmony instead of discord, thinking true thoughts instead of error thoughts, love thoughts instead of hatred thoughts, health thoughts, upbuilding thoughts instead of destructive tearing down thoughts. A great many regular physicians now, and all soon will, show patients how they can make use of the great healing, medicinal power of thought, the miracle of right thinking, which unites them with the force back of the flesh. They will show each patient what attitudes of mind, what affirmations and what autosuggestions will tend to keep him in harmony. They will teach him the healing use of suggestion. The physician of the future will use largely for his remedies, ideas, mental attitudes, and suggestions. The time will come when parents and teachers will realize the tremendous force, the character-building power in the affirmation of health, wholeness, completeness, harmony. They will teach children to exert this power that will drive out discord and dispel disease. They will impress upon the young that affirmation of perfect ideals, holding in mind the model of a perfect man, a perfect woman, not the one marred, crippled, shorn of strength and beauty by violation of mental law, or by vicious living, will protect them from all assaults from without and from within. If that mind was always in us which was in Christ, the mind that gives health, peace and happiness, that perpetuates harmony, truth and beauty, we should never know discord of any kind. Perfect health would be the rule and not the exception, because we should never transgress the laws of our being. 12. You are headed toward your ideal. Faith and the ideal still remain the most powerful levers of progress and of happiness. Jean Finot. If we are content to unfold the life within according to the pattern given us, we shall reach the highest end of which we are capable. We tend to grow into the likeness of the things we long for most, think about most. The gods we worship write their names on our faces. Emerson. In Hawthorne's story, The Great Stone Face, we have an impressive illustration of the power of an ideal. One's memory holds a vivid picture of its hero, whose mind had dwelt from childhood on the local tradition that a man-child should be born whose face would resemble that of the mountain profile above the little hamlet of his nativity, and that this child would eventually become the leader and savior of the people. So wholeheartedly did he believe the legend, so earnestly did he long for its fulfillment, and so constantly did his eyes dwell on the prophetic profile, that unconsciously his own features changed until, outwardly as well as inwardly, he completely embodied the ideal which his mind had absorbed. On every hand we see illustrations of the transforming power of the ideal. It is outpictured in the faces we see in the street, in trains and shops, in theaters and churches, wherever people congregate. How quickly we can select from a crowd of strangers the successful businessman. His initiative, leadership, executive ability, speak out of his face and manner. The same is true of men in other vocations, of the scholar, the clergyman, the lawyer, the teacher, the doctor, the farmer, the day laborer. Go into any institution, factory, store, or other place of business and you can quickly detect the nature of the ideals outpictured in the faces, in the expression, in the manner of the people you see there. Visit Sing Sing and you will see the power of the ideal which has worked like a leaven in its inmates. The criminal suggestion, the criminal thought, the criminal ideal is reflected in the faces of those who visualized crime, planned and thought out its details long before they committed the criminal act. Whatever we hold in our minds, dwell upon, contemplate, whatever is dominant in our motives, will stand out in our flesh so that the world can read it. Many absolutely authentic cases of stigmata are recorded in the lives of medieval saints, on whose bodies appeared an exact reproduction of all the wounds of the crucified Christ. Some of these cases were in convents and monasteries, and were the result of long and intense concentration of the mind of the subject upon the physical sufferings of Christ. Frequently the phenomena occurred after the austerities of Lent, during which the monks and nuns had focused more intensely and steadily upon the tortures of the Saviour's passion and death. If the contemplation of those tortures, the constant mental picturing of the sufferings of the God-man, the soul's great sympathy with its ideal could change the very tissues of the body, could reproduce on it the actual physical marks of the cruel spear in the side, of the nails in the hands and feet and of the thorns in the head, think of the wonderful possibilities in the reversal of these thoughts and this picturing. Think of what the contemplation of the wonderful work accomplished by the Savior on earth, of the constant mental picturing of his glorious life, of his tenderness and love for humanity, of his power and dignity, of his continual outpouring of himself in service, Think of what the constant holding of such an ideal, such a model, and the perpetual effort to realize it would do for the race. We tend to become like what we admire, sympathize with and persistently hold in mind. The hero of The Great Stone Face became the counterpart of his ideal. The history of Christianity is a continuous record of the power of the ideal to raise men and women to their highest power. St. Paul, one of the most conspicuous of these examples, is so possessed, so enthused by the inspiration of his great model, that he cries, "I live, not I, but Christ in me." The contemplation of perfection is always uplifting. Nothing so strengthens the mind, enlarges manhood, or womanhood, widens the thought, as the constant effort to measure up to high ideals. The struggle to better our best, to make our highest moments permanent, the continual reaching of the mind to the things above and beyond, the steady pursuit of the ideal, which constantly advances as we pursue, is what has led the race up from savagery to 20th century civilization. A great artist was one day found by a friend in tears in his studio. When asked the cause of his distress, he replied, "I have produced a work with which I am satisfied, and I shall never produce another." It is said he never did. The inspiration that had urged him on was his ideal. That kept him always striving to improve on what he had previously done. Without it there was nothing to strive for. Without an ideal there is no growth, and where there is no growth there is retrogression. Without a vision the people perish. Nothing in the universe is static. None of us stands still. We are all traveling in some direction, either forward or backward. Everything depends on the ideal. What we admire and aspire to enters into the very texture of our being, becomes a part of us. If we had the power to analyze any individual, we could tell what books he had read, could detect the type of his friends and associates, and could name his heroes, that is, we could tell what ideals had actuated him. Parents and teachers should urge upon the young the importance of hero worship, of choosing the highest human ideals. Our lives are molded chiefly after the pattern of the ideals of our youth, and there is no danger of too much hero worship, if only the heroes are worthy. History is full of examples of the powerful influence of ideals upon our great men. It is said that Alexander the Great always carried a copy of Homer's Iliad in his pocket, and that he never tired of reading about Achilles, the great hero, whom he was ambitious to resemble. Many a young man in this country who has been inspired, encouraged, and stimulated by Lincoln's career, has not only lived a grander life and made a truer success because he modeled his life after that of his hero, but he has developed many qualities in common with Lincoln which otherwise might have lain forever dormant. Many a young officer in our army is more efficient because of his imitation of Grant and Lee, the ideals which haunted his dreams and which have ever urged him up and on. It is of the utmost importance to choose our ideal early in life, a high and beautiful ideal, that shall be our pole star, the highest, brightest light we know. A recent writer says, "My advice to all those just starting to travel life's turnpike is, don't start until you have your ideal. Then don't stop until you get it." Of course we all have ideals of some kind when we are young, but how many of us keep them even till middle age? What young man has entered into active life without an ideal before him of what he is going to do, and how the world is going to be bettered by him? What young girl but who, leaving school, life smiling before her, dreams of the ideal love she will find, the ideal happy home she will make, and the beautiful work she will do in life with the ideal man of her girlish dreams by her side? But do the youth and the maiden hold these ideals throughout the years, with the strength of conviction that overcomes all difficulties, or do they abandon them with the first discouragement and settle down into a commonplace existence with interest in nothing above the material? To youth, naturally, come glorious ideals, not only of what one's own life is to be, but of what life in general should be, the ideal man, the ideal woman, the ideal social system, and with all these is a vague desire or intention to help toward their fulfillment. But too often the result of disappointment in the effort to better conditions is, first, to give up the hope of realizing the ideal, and then to abandon the ideal itself. Here is where the great danger of retrogression comes in. Unless the ideal be held with a tenacity that no failure or disappointment can relax, it is apt to fade away after the first ardor of youth is past. One of the greatest aids to the preservation of the youthful ideal in all its freshness and beauty is to recall frequently, daily, the moral heroes who first gave one a glimpse of one's possibilities and aroused one's ambition. Read the special books, or particular chapters which fired you to emulate some noble character. Renew yourself mentally by visualizing the life and work of men and women who have wrought nobly for humanity. Think of the Washingtons, the Franklins, the Lincolns, the Emersons, the Ruskins, the Florence Nightingales, the Jane Addams, the Susan B. Anthonys, the Frances Willards, and you will be strengthened to resist the debasing influence of the fierce competition for wealth and preferment, even for mere subsistence, which in so many instances pushes out of sight the aspirations and ideals of youth. Keep constantly in mind the grand characters whose achievements aroused you to noble thoughts and endeavor in the springtime of life, and your standards will never drop. Character always develops according to the pattern within us. No artist could paint the face of Christ with the model of Judas before his mental vision. No great character can ever be built with low, groveling ideals in the mind. The constant struggle to measure up to a high ideal is the only force in heaven or on earth that can make a life great, beautiful, and fruitful. If we would ever accomplish anything of worth, if we would ever establish our oneness with the Creator, and accomplish the work He sent us here to do, we must live up to our ideal. With eyes fixed on this ideal, we must work with heart and hand and brain, with a faith that never grows dim, with a resolution that never wavers, with a patience that is akin to genius. We must persevere unto the end, for, as we advance, our ideal as steadily moves upward. The situation that has not its duty, its ideal, says Carlyle, was never yet occupied by man. Yes, here, in this poor, miserable, hampered, despicable actual, wherein thou even now standest, here or nowhere is thy ideal. Work it out therefrom, and, working, believe, live, be free. Fool! The ideal is in thyself. Never were truer words spoken. Wrapped up in every human being there are divine energies which, if given proper direction, will develop the ideal from stage to stage. Who sees a sculptor at work upon a block of marble sees what appears to be only a mechanical performance. But, out of sight in the sculptor's brain, there is a quiet presence we do not perceive, and every movement of the hand is impelled by that shining thought within the brain. That presence is the ideal. Without it he would be a mason, through it he becomes an artist. The ideal is the real. By it we shape our lives as the sculptor shapes the image from the rough marble. External means alone will not accomplish this. You must lay hold of eternal principles, of the everlasting verities, or you never can approach your ideal. Your first advance toward it lies in what you are doing now, in what you are thinking. Not on some far-off height, in some distant scene, or fabled land, where longing without endeavor is magically satisfied, will we carve out the ideal that haunts our souls, but, here and now in this poor, mean actual, here or nowhere is our ideal. In the humble valley, on the boundless prairie, on the farm, on sea, or on land, in workshop, store, or office, wherever there is honest work for the hand and brain of man to do, within the circumscribed limits of our daily duties, is the field wherein the outworking of our ideal must be wrought. Your circumstances may be uncongenial, says James Allen, but they shall not long remain so if you but perceive an ideal and strive to reach it. You cannot travel within and stand still without. Here is a youth hard pressed by poverty and labor, confined long hours in an unhealthy workshop, unschooled, and lacking all the arts of refinement. But he dreams of better things, he thinks of intelligence, of refinement, of grace and beauty. He conceives of, mentally builds up, an ideal condition of life. The vision of a wider liberty and a larger scope takes possession of him, unrest urges him to action, and he utilizes all his spare time and means, small though they are, to the development of his latent powers and resources. Very soon so altered has his mind become that the workshop can no longer hold him. It has become so out of harmony with his mentality that it falls out of his life as a garment is cast aside, and, with the growth of opportunities which fit the scope of his expanding powers, he passes out of it forever. Years later we see this youth as a full-grown man. We find him a master of certain forces of the mind which he wields with worldwide influence and almost unequaled power. In his hands he holds the cords of gigantic responsibilities, he speaks, and lo! Lives are changed, men and women hang upon his words and remold their characters, and, sun-like, he becomes the fixed and luminous center round which innumerable destinies revolve. He has realized the vision of his youth. He has become one with his ideal. The great curse of the average person is commonness, the lack of aspiring ideals. There are thousands of farmers who never get above cattle and wheat, of doctors who never become superior to prescriptions and diseases, of lawyers who never wholly subordinate their briefs. The ideals of the masses rarely rise out of mediocrity. Most of us live in the basement of our lives, while the upper stories are all unused. Millions of human beings never get out of the kitchen of their existence. We need aspiration and great thought models to lift us. God has whispered into the ear of all existence, look up. There is potential celestial gravitation in every mortal. There is a spiritual hunger in humanity which, if fed and nourished, will lead to the upbuilding and developing of great souls. There is a latent divinity in every son of Adam, which must be aroused before there can be any great progress in individual uplift. In a factory where mariners' compasses are made before the needles are magnetized, they will lie in any position, but when once touched by the mighty magnet, once electrified by that mysterious power, they ever afterwards point only in one direction. Many a young life lies listless, purposeless, until touched by the divine magnet, after which, if it nourishes its aspirations, it always points to the north star of its hope and its ideal. Every faintest aspiration that springs up in our heart is a heavenly seed within us which will grow and develop into rich beauty if only it be fed, encouraged. The better things do not grow either in material or mental soil without care and nourishment. Only weeds, briars, and noxious plants thrive easily. The aspiration that is not translated into active effort will die, just as any power or function that is not used will atrophy or disappear. The ostrich, naturalists say, once had wonderful wings, but not caring to use them, preferring to walk on the earth rather than mount in the air, it practically lost its wings, their strength passing into its legs. The giraffe probably once had only an ordinary neck, like other animals, but being long used to reach up to gather its food from the branches of trees, it lifted its body in the upward direction until it is now the tallest of all animals, its elongated neck enabling it to gather the leaves from lofty trees. Something like this takes place continually in human lives. We rise or fall by our ideals, by our pursuit or our disregard of them. The majority of us make bungling work of our living. We spend much precious time and effort catering to the desires of our animal natures and live chiefly along the lines of life's lower aims and opportunities when we might be soaring. Everywhere we see men making a splendid living, but a very poor life, succeeding in their vocations but failing as men, swerving from their own highest ideals for the sake of making a little more money. On every hand we see people sacrificing the higher to the lower, dwarfing the best thing in them for a superficial material advantage, selling the birthright of the soul's ideal for a mess of pottage. Is there any reason or intelligence in a man's continuing to turn his ability, his energies, all there is in him, into dollars after he has many times more of these than he can ever use for living and betterment? Is the gift of life so cheap, so meaningless, of so little importance, that we can afford to spend time on things that do not endure, upon unnecessary material things which so soon pass away, to the neglect of those that endure? We know that life is our great opportunity to acquit ourselves like men. Yet it is too often into these transient things that we pour the full force of our energies, while we only sigh and wish that we could achieve our ideals. We sacrifice much to gain wealth, but practically nothing to realize the outreach of our souls. Yet the ideal is indeed the pearl of great price, in the balance with which all that a man hath, besides is as nothing. The red-letter men of the world have always been men of high ideals, to which they were ever loyal, men who have said, "This one thing I do," and have put the whole strength of their lives into their effort to realize their ideal. If from the start you listen to and obey that something within which urges you to find the road that leads up higher, if you listen to and obey the voice which bids you look up and not down, which ever calls you on and up, no matter what its outward seeming, your life cannot be a failure. The really successful men and women are those who by the nobility of their example contribute to the uplift, the happiness, the enlargement of life, to the wisdom of the world, not those who have merely piled up selfish dollars. A rich personality enriches everybody who comes in contact with it. Everybody who touches a noble life feels ennobled thereby. There is machinery so delicate that it can measure the least expenditure of physical force. If similar machinery could be devised for measuring character, many a millionaire would be chagrined at the record of his own just measurement, while many an humble worker would be amazed at the high mark his earnest unceasing efforts to reach his ideal had achieved. I believe the time will come when not money, but growth, not lands and houses, but mental and moral expansion in larger and nobler living, will be even the popular measure of true riches, real success. The measure of a successful man will be that of his soul. He will be rated in a new sort of Bradstreet, a spiritual Bradstreet, as a large heart, a magnanimous mind, a cultured intellect, instead of as a great check-book. Phillips Brooks said, "The ideal life of full completion haunts us all. We feel the thing we ought to be beating beneath the thing we are. God hides some ideal in every human soul. At some time in his life, each feels a trembling, fearful longing to do some great good thing. Life finds its noblest spring of excellence in its hidden impulse to do one's best. Every one who substitutes the finer for the cheaper goal, each one who today and every day holds to his high ideal despite the stress and turmoil of modern daily living, in such measure hastens the day when such an ideal will be the inspiration of the masses and the power that moves the world." 13. How to make the brain work for us during sleep. Would you not think yourself fortunate to have a secretary of great ability and worth, absolutely subject, day and night, to your will, and so susceptible to instructions that even your slightest mental suggestion would be faithfully carried out? If you had such a secretary, and knew that in spite of his great ability he would be able to do what you suggested only in proportion to your belief in his power to do so, would you not be careful to entertain no doubts of his ability to carry out your wishes or suggestions? Now, just substitute for this personal secretary your subconscious self, that part of you which is below the threshold of your consciousness, and try to realize that this self is actually the sort of secretary I have endeavored to describe, capable of carrying out all your desires, of executing all your purposes, of realizing your ambitions, to the exact extent of your belief in its powers, and you will get some idea of what it can accomplish for you. This secretary is closer to you than your breath, nearer than your heartbeat, a faithful servant, walking by your side all through life, to execute your faintest wish, to carry out your desires, to help you to achieve your aims. Every bit of help, of encouragement, of support you give to this other self will add to the magnificence, the splendor of your destiny. On the other hand, all negative, vicious thoughts, all selfishness, greed and envy, all doubts and fears, all the discouraging, destructive thoughts you entertain, will impair and weaken your secretary or servant in exact proportion to their intensity and persistency. In fact, it rests with yourself whether your secretary shall be your greatest help, a heavenly friend and assistant, or your greatest hindrance, your worst enemy. It doesn't matter what we call them, subconscious and conscious self, or subjective and objective mind, we are all conscious that these are two forces constantly at work in us. One commands and the other obeys. We know that one of these, the subjective mind, does not originate its acts, but gets its instructions from the objective mind, which contains the will power. Experience shows us that the subjective or subconscious mind, which I have called a personal secretary, is a servant which obeys our will, carries out our wishes, and registers in the brain a faithful record not only of every thought, word and act of ours, but of everything we see, and everything we hear others say. Coleridge tells of a remarkable instance of the truth of this. A young German servant girl was taken ill with a fever, and in her delirium she recited correctly long passages from famous authors in Latin, Greek and Hebrew. Scholars were called in to hear this uneducated girl speaking fluently tongues of which she had no knowledge in her conscious moments, and to tell if they could what it meant. They were much puzzled and could make nothing of it, but later the miracle was explained. Years before, it seems, the girl had lived in a minister's family, and was accustomed to hear her master recite the classics aloud. She had listened attentively, and her subconscious mind had faithfully recorded every word in her brain, and reproduced what it had heard when the objective mind was quiescent. Numerous instances might be cited to show that our subconscious mind is the record storehouse of all that has ever happened to us. Every thought, every experience, whatever passes before the eye, or that we see or hear or feel is registered accurately in our brain by our subconscious mind. Now, if this other self, personal secretary, subconscious mind, or whatever we choose to call it, has such enormous power, why can it not be trained to work for us when we are asleep as well as when we are awake? Have you ever thought of the possibilities of spiritual and mental development during sleep? Has it ever occurred to you that while the processes of repair and upbuilding are proceeding normally in the body, the mind also may be expanding, the soul as well as the body may be growing? When corporal and voluntary things are quiescent, the Lord operates, said Swedenborg. The great Swedish philosopher was a firm believer in the activity of the other self during sleep. He claimed that his spiritual vision was opened in the unconscious hours of the night. The Bible teems with illustrations of the activity of the subconscious mind or self during sleep. Warnings are given, work is commanded to be done, visions are seen, plans are outlined, angels are conversed with, courses of conduct advised, and every suggestion made to the soul in the dream state is literally carried out in the waking hours. Theosophists believe that during sleep the soul or spirit acts independently of the body, that it actually leaves the body and goes out into the night to perform tasks appointed it by the Creator. As a matter of fact, few people realize what an immense amount of work is carried on automatically in the body under the direction of the subconscious mind. If the entire brain and nervous system were to go to sleep at night, all of the bodily functions would stop. The heart would cease to beat, the stomach, the liver, the kidneys and the other glands would no longer act, the various digestive processes would cease to operate, all the physical organs would cease working, and we should stop breathing. One of the deepest mysteries of nature's processes is that of putting a part of the brain and nervous system, and most of the mental faculties which were in use during the day, under the sweet ether of sleep while she repairs and rejuvenates every cell and every tissue, but at the same time keeping in the most active condition a great many of the bodily processes and even certain of the mental and creative faculties. These are awake and alert all the time while the sleeper is in a state of unconsciousness. Most of us probably have had the experience of dropping to sleep at night discouraged because we could not solve some vexing problem to our satisfaction. It may have been one in mathematics during our school days, or, later on, a weightier one in business or professional life, and behold, in the morning, without any conscious effort on our part, the problem was solved, all its intricacies were unraveled, and what had so puzzled us the night before was perfectly clear when we woke up in the morning. Our conscious, objective self did not enter the mysterious laboratory where the miracle was wrought. We do not know how it was wrought. We only know that it was done somehow, without our knowledge, while we slept. Some of our greatest inventions and discoveries have been worked out by the subconscious mind during sleep. Many an inventor who went to sleep with a puzzled brain, discouraged and disheartened because he could not make the connecting link between his theory and its practical application, awoke in the morning with his problem solved. Mathematicians and astronomers have had marvelous results worked out while they slept, answers to questions which had puzzled them beyond measure during their waking hours. Writers, poets, painters, musicians, all have received inspiration for their work while the body slumbered. Many people attempt to explain these things on a purely physical basis. They attribute the apparent phenomenon to the mere fact that the brain has been refreshed and renewed during the night, and that, consequently, we can think better and more clearly in the morning. That is true, so far as it goes, but there is something more, something beyond this. We know that ideas are suggested and problems actually worked out along lines which did not occur to the waking mind. Most of us have had experiences of some kind or another which show that there is some great principle, some intelligent power back of the flesh, but not of it, which is continually active in our lives, helping us to solve our problems. One of the most interesting instances of this kind is given in the biography of the great scientist, Professor Louis Agassiz, by his widow. He, Professor Agassiz, the writer says, had been for 2 weeks striving to decipher the somewhat obscure impression of a fossil fish on the stone slab in which it was preserved. Weary and perplexed, he put his work aside at last, and tried to dismiss it from his mind. Shortly after, he waked one night persuaded that while asleep he had seen his fish with all the missing features perfectly restored. But when he tried to hold and make fast the image it escaped him. Nevertheless, he went early to the Jardin des Plantes, thinking that on looking anew at the impression he should see something which would put him on the track of his vision. In vain, the blurred record was as blank as ever. The next night he saw the fish again, but with no more satisfactory result. When he awoke it disappeared from his memory as before. Hoping that the same experience might be repeated, on the third night he placed a pencil and paper beside his bed before going to sleep. Accordingly, towards morning the fish reappeared in his dream, confusedly at first, but at last with such distinctness that he had no longer any doubt as to its zoological characters. Still half dreaming, in perfect darkness, he traced these characters on the sheet of paper at the bedside. In the morning he was surprised to see in his nocturnal sketch features which he thought it impossible the fossil itself should reveal. He hastened to the Jardin des Plantes, and, with his drawing as a guide, succeeded in chiseling away the surface of the stone under which portions of the fish proved to be hidden. When wholly exposed it corresponded with his dream and his drawing, and he succeeded in classifying it with ease. We are all familiar with examples of the marvelous feats performed by somnambulists. They will get up and dress while fast asleep, lock and unlock doors, go out and walk and ride in the most dangerous places, where they would not attempt to go when awake. Many have been known to walk with sure feet along the extreme edges of roofs of houses, on the banks of rivers, or close to the edge of precipices, where one false step would precipitate them to death. They will speak, write, act, and move as if entirely conscious of what they are doing. A somnambulist will answer questions put to him while asleep and carry on a conversation rationally. In this respect the state of the sleepwalker is similar to that of a person in a hypnotic trance. He can be acted on from without and remain wholly unconscious. Surgical operations have been performed upon a hypnotized person without the use of anesthetics, and there is no doubt that this also would be possible during profound sleep. The subjective mind is much more susceptible to suggestion when the objective mind is unconscious. There is no resistance on account of prejudice or external influences. That we are on the eve of marvelous possibilities of treating disease during sleep there is not the slightest doubt. The same is true of habit forming, mind changing, of mind improving, of strengthening deficient faculties, of eradicating peculiarities and idiosyncrasies, of neutralizing injurious hereditary tendencies, of increasing ability. The possibilities of changing the disposition and of mind building during sleep are only beginning to be realized. The power of the subjective mind over the body is well illustrated by the fact that thoughts aroused in a hypnotized person can very materially shift the circulation of the blood. They can send it at will to any part of the body. The hypnotist can make his subject blush or turn pale, express in his face fierce anger or appealing love. He can at will produce anesthesia in any part of the body so that a needle or knife may be inserted in the flesh without causing the slightest pain. He can so impress the hypnotized person's mind with the belief that the water he drinks is whiskey that he will actually exhibit all the appearance of drunkenness. He can make him believe that the spoonful of water he takes is full of poison so that he will immediately develop the symptoms of poisoning. The subjective mind is not only capable of carrying out orders but, as has already been shown, every impression made on it is indelible. How often we say, when we cannot recall a well-known name, or the details of some important event or experience, well, I cannot think of that now, but it will come to me, I shall think of it later. And how often have the forgotten details flashed into our mind when the occasion had passed and we were thinking of something else? Again and again have we puzzled our brains at night trying to think of some particular thing which had gone out of our memory, only to find it waiting for us in the morning. We are beginning to realize that all of our experiences during the day, all of our thoughts, emotions and mental attitudes, the multitude of little things which seem to make but a fleeting impression, are not in reality lost. Every day leaves its phonographic records on the brain, and these records are never erased or destroyed. They simply drop into the subconscious mind and are ever on call. They may not come at once in response to our summons, but they are still there and are often, many years after they have dropped into the subconscious mind, reproduced with all their original vividness. I heard recently of a prominent banker who lost a very important key, the only one to the bank treasures. He claimed that it had not been lost in the ordinary way, but stolen. Suspicion at once attached to the employees. A prominent detective was placed in the bank, and, after watching and questioning everyone on the staff, he became convinced that none but the banker himself knew anything about the key. Every detective is necessarily something of a mind reader, and this one, believing firmly in his own theory, suggested a simple plan for recovering the key. He told the banker to quit suspecting the employees and worrying about burglars getting the bank's treasures, to relax his overwrought mind and go to sleep with the belief that he himself had put the key away somewhere, and that it would be found in the morning. If you do this, he said, I believe the mystery will be solved. The banker, to the best of his ability, did as the detective suggested, and on getting up the following morning he was instinctively led to a certain secret place, and, behold, there was the key. He was not conscious that he had put it there, but after finding it he had a faint recollection of previously going to this place. The banker's objective or conscious mind was probably busy with something else when he put the key away. Only his subconscious self had any knowledge of what he was doing. Then when he missed the key his fears, his worry, his anxiety, his suspicions and generally wrought-up mentality made it impossible for his subjective mind to reveal the secret to him. But after his mind had become poised and he was again in tune with his subjective intelligence, the information was passed along. Dr. Hack Tuke, a distinguished English authority on the subject. The memory, freed from distraction as it sometimes is, he says, is so vivid as to enable the sleeper to recall events which had happened years before and which had been entirely forgotten. Now, if, as we have seen, the subconscious mind can perform real work, real service for us, why should we not use it especially during sleep? Why should we not avail ourselves of this enormous creative force to strengthen all our powers and possibilities, to piece out, virtually to lengthen our time, our lives? Think what it would mean to us in a lifetime if we could keep these sleepless creative functions always in superb condition so that they would go on during the night working out our problems, unraveling our difficulties, carrying forward our plans, while we are asleep. We have sufficient proof already to show that they do actual constructive work, but the testimony of Dr. Tuke on this point is of interest. That the exercise of thought, and this on a high level, is consistent with sleep can hardly be doubted, he writes. Arguments are employed in debate which are not always illogical. We dreamed one night, subsequent to a lively conversation with a friend on spiritualism, that we instituted a number of test experiments in reference to it. The nature of these tests was retained vividly in the memory after waking. They were by no means wanting in ingenuity, and proved that the mental operations were in good form. It is now established beyond a doubt that certain parts of the brain continue active during the night when the rest of it is under the anesthetic of sleep. But we have hardly begun to realize what a tremendous ally this sleepless creative part of the brain can be made in our mental development. It is well known that most of the growth of the child, of its skeleton, muscles, nerves, and all the 12 different kinds of tissues in its body takes place during sleep, that there is comparatively little during the activities of the day. It is not so well understood that our minds also grow during the night, that they develop along the lines of the ideals, thoughts, and emotions with which we feed them before retiring. All the analogies go to prove that the mind is always awake, says M. Geoffroy. The mind during sleep is not in a special mood or state, but it goes on and develops itself absolutely as in the waking hours. As a matter of fact, we never awake just the same being as when we went to sleep. We are either better or worse. We changed while we slept. While our senses are wrapped in slumber, the subjective mind is busily at work. It is either building up or tearing down. It is my firm belief that by an intelligent, systematic direction of this sleepless faculty of the brain we can actually make it create for us along the line of our desires. As it is, most people, by not putting the mind in proper condition before going to sleep, not only do not intelligently use this marvelous creative agency, but they destroy all possibility of beneficial results from its action. It is as necessary to prepare the mind for sleep as it is to prepare the body. The following chapter offers some suggestions on this point. 14. Preparing the mind for sleep. Sleep, gentle sleep, how have I fright thee? Shakespeare. Not long ago I heard a young lady say that it was simply impossible for any woman to look charming or to be agreeable right after getting up in the morning. The Reverend Dr. Bushnell declared that a man must be next to a devil who wakes angry. The way we feel when we awake in the morning depends on how we were feeling or thinking when we went to sleep. If we retire holding a grudge against a neighbor, with a resolve to get square with somebody who has injured us, if we have hatred or jealousy in our heart, if we are envious of another's success, and if we go to sleep nursing these feelings, we awake in a depressed, exhausted state, feeling bitter, pessimistic, irritable, unhappy, about as nearly like a devil as it is possible for a human being to feel. The destroyer was at work all night, running amok among the delicate brain and nerve cells, furiously tearing down what beneficent nature had taken such pains to upbuild. But, when we take pleasant, kindly, loving thoughts to bed with us, we awake refreshed, in a happy, contented frame of mind. Our sleepless faculties spent the hours in upbuilding, performing friendly offices for us during the night. Few people ever think of preparing the mind for sleep, yet it is even more necessary than it is to prepare the body. Most of us take great pains to put the latter in order. We undress, take a warm bath, massage the face with some sort of refreshing salve, cold cream, or oil. We make sure that our sleeping room is properly ventilated and that our bed is clean and comfortable, but to the matter of preparing our minds we don't give a thought. Instead of making our subconscious mental processes build for us in the night, we allow them to tear down much of what we have built during the day. Many of us grow old, haggard and wrinkled in the night, when just the reverse ought to be the case, for nature herself has ordained that night should be the building, the renewing, time of life. If we were only to prepare the mind for sleep with the same intelligence and care that we prepare the body, if we were to give it a cleansing mental bath, wiping from memory's slate all black, discordant pictures, all the worries and fears which vexed and perplexed us during the day, instead of having the nightmare panorama passing and repassing before us during the night, robbing us of needed rest and neutralizing our upbuilding, recuperative forces, what a difference it would make in our achievement, in our lives. I know men whose lives have been revolutionized by adopting the practice of putting themselves in a harmonious condition, getting in tune with the infinite before going to sleep. Formerly they were in the habit of retiring in a bad mood, tired, discouraged over anticipated evils, worrying about all sorts of things. They would discuss their misfortunes at night with their wives and then fall to thinking over the unfortunate conditions in their affairs, their mistakes, and the possible evil consequences that might result from them. Naturally, their minds were in an upset condition when they fell asleep, and, as might have been expected, the melancholy, black, ugly pictures of the misfortunes they feared, vividly exaggerated in the stillness of the night, became etched deeper and deeper on their brains and did their baleful work, making real rest and reinvigoration absolutely impossible. When they reformed their habits, changed their thought, and retired in a peaceful frame of mind with the intention of going to sleep, instead of tossing about thinking of their troubles, their business straightway began to improve. They were stronger, fresher, more vigorous, more resourceful, better able to cope with difficulties, to make plans and to carry them out than when they were depleting their physical and mental resources by robbing themselves of their best friend, nature's restorative, sleep. Many people tell me they cannot stop thinking after they go to bed. Their brains are so active, doing their next day's work, that they cannot stop the mental processes for hours. Of course you cannot stop all thinking the first night you begin to form the new habit, when you have practiced the old night thinking habit for years, when perhaps as far back as you can remember you have gone to bed every night worrying, thinking, planning ahead for days, for weeks, for months, planning ahead perhaps for the coming year. But if you persist, and make it a cast iron rule to allow no anxieties or fears, no business troubles or discords of any kind to enter your bed chamber, you will succeed in accomplishing your object. Think of your chamber as the one place sacred to rest, where the things that trouble and harass and vex during the daytime shall find no entrance. Put this legend over the door, or in some conspicuous place where you can see it. This is my holy of holies, the place of supreme peace and power in my life from which all discord must be shut out. When you undress and lie down, say to yourself, I have done my best during the day. Now I am going to drop thinking, drop worrying and planning, and get good, refreshing sleep to prepare me for tomorrow's work. Clear your mind not only of all anxious, worrying business thoughts, but also of all ill will or hatred toward another. Resolve that you will not harbor an unpleasant, bitter, or unkind thought of any human being, that you will wipe off the slate of your memory everything you have ever had against anyone, that you will forget whatever is unpleasant in the past and start with a clean slate. Just imagine that the words harmony, peace, love, goodwill to every living creature, are emblazoned in letters of light all over the walls of your room. Repeat them over and over until that other self, that personal secretary just below the threshold of your consciousness, becomes saturated with the ideas they convey, and after a while you will drop into slumber with a serene, poised mind, a mind filled with happy, joyous, creative thoughts. Of course, until the new habit is fixed, thoughts will intrude themselves in spite of you, but you needn't harbor them. You needn't allow yourself, under any circumstances, to go on thinking about business or any discordant thing after you retire any more than you would allow a madman to slash you with a knife without making any attempt to defend yourself. You can, if you only persist in the new and better way, fall asleep every night like a tired child, and awake in the morning just as refreshed and happy. Your subconscious self will, after a while, carry out your behests without any conscious effort on your part. This sleepless subconscious self is, in fact, one of the most effective agents man has to help him accomplish whatever he desires. Insomnia, for instance, which is the curse of so many Americans, may be entirely overcome by its aid. If you are a victim of insomnia, and go to bed every night with the thought firmly fixed in your consciousness that you are not going to sleep, you are, to a great extent, the victim of your belief. The conviction in your subconscious mind that there is something the matter with your sleeping ability is largely responsible for the continuance of your trouble. We know by experience that we can convince ourselves of almost anything by affirming it long enough and often enough. The constant repetition, after a while, establishes the belief in our minds that the thing is true. We can establish the sleep habit just as easily as any other habit. It is perfectly possible by means of affirmation, the constant repetition in heart-to-heart talks with yourself to regain your power to sleep normally. Your subconscious self, that side of your nature which presides over the involuntary or automatic functions during sleep, as well as while you are awake, as, for instance, walking, and other things which do not require volition of the mind or a special willpower, can be made to obey your commands, or rather suggestions, to overcome insomnia. Say to this inner self, you know there is no reason why you should not sleep. There is no defect in your physical or mental makeup which keeps you awake. You ought to sleep soundly so many hours every night. There is no reason why you should not, and you are going to do so tonight. Repeat similar affirmations during the day. Say to yourself, this sleeplessness is only a bad habit. If you were ill physically or mentally, if you had any serious defect in your nervous system which would give any excuse for insomnia, it would be a different thing, but you haven't anything of the sort. You are simply the slave of a senseless obsession and you are going to break it up. You are going to begin right away. You are going to sleep better tonight, tomorrow night, and the next night. You are going to get through with this bogey you have built up in your imagination which has no existence in reality. Nothing keeps you awake but your conviction, your fear, that you are not going to sleep. Prepare your mind for sleep in the way already suggested by emptying it of all worry and fear, all envy and uncharitableness, everything that disturbs, irritates, or excites. Crowd these out with thoughts of joy, of good cheer, of things which will help and inspire. Compose yourself with the belief that you will go to sleep easily and naturally, relax every muscle and say to yourself in a quiet drowsy voice, I am so sleepy, so sleepy, so sleepy. The subconscious self will listen and in a short time will automatically put your suggestion into practice. It is needless to say that if insomnia is a result of bad or irregular habits, the victim must first of all change his habits before he can expect any relief. Man is a bundle of habits. We perform most of our life functions with greater or less regularity, so that they become practically automatic. Regularity, system, order are imperative for our health, our success, and our happiness. This is especially true in regard to sleep. We must keep regular hours, be systematic in our habits, or our sleep is likely to suffer. If you play as hard as you work, refresh and rejuvenate yourself by pleasant recreation and a jolly good time when your work is done, and then at a regular hour every night prepare your mind for sleep, just as you would prepare your body, give it a mental bath and clothe it in beautiful thoughts, you will in a short time establish the habit of sound, peaceful, refreshing sleep. Whatever else you do, or do not, form the habit of making a call on the great within of yourself before retiring. Leave there the message of uplift, of self-betterment and self-enlargement, that which you yearn for and long to realize but do not know just how to attain. Registering this call, this demand for something higher and nobler, in your subconsciousness, putting it right up to yourself, will work like a leaven during the night, and, after a while, all the building forces within you will unite in furthering your aim, in helping you to realize your vision, whatever it may be. The period of sleep may be made a wonderful period of growth, for the mind as well as for the body. It is a time when you can attract your desires, it is a propitious time to nurse your vision. Instead of making an enemy of your subconscious self by giving it destructive thoughts to work with, explosives that will destroy much of what you have accomplished during the day, make it your friend by giving it strong, creative, helpful thoughts with which to go on creating, building for you during the night. There are marvelous possibilities for health and character, success and happiness building, during sleep. Every thought dropped into the subconscious mind before we go to sleep is a seed that will germinate in the night while we are unconscious and ultimately bring forth a harvest of its kind. By impressing upon it our desires, picturing as vividly as possible our ideals, what we wish to become, and what we long to accomplish, we will be surprised to see how quickly that wonderful force in the subjective self will begin to shape the pattern, to copy the model which it is given. In this way we can correct habits which are wounding our self-respect, humiliating us, marring our usefulness and efficiency, perhaps sapping our lives. We can get rid of faults and imperfections, we can strengthen our weak faculties and overcome vicious tendencies which the willpower may not be strong enough to correct in the daytime. If, as now seems clear, the subconscious mind can build or destroy, can make us happy or miserable according to the pattern we give it before going to sleep, if it can solve the problems of the inventor, of the discoverer, of the troubled businessman, why do we not use it more? Why do we not avail ourselves of this tremendous, mysterious force for life building, character building, success building, happiness building, instead of for life destroying? One reason is that we are only just beginning to discover that we can control this secondary self or intelligence, which regulates all the functions of the body without the immediate orders of the objective self. We are getting a glimpse of what it is capable of doing by experiments upon hypnotized subjects, when the objective mind, the mind which gets most of its material through the five senses, is shut off and the other, the subjective mind, is in control. We are finding that it is comparatively easy while a person is in a hypnotic state to make wonderful changes in disposition, and to correct vicious habits, mental and moral defects, through suggestion. There is no doubt that so far as the subjective mind is concerned we are in a similar condition when asleep as when in a hypnotic trance, and experiments have shown that marvelous results are possible, especially in the case of children, by talking to them, during their sleep, advising them, counseling them, suggesting things that are for their good. Parents should teach their children how to prepare their minds for sleep so that the subconscious self would produce something beautiful instead of the black, discordant images of fear which so often terrorize little ones before they fall asleep and when they wake up in the dark hours of the night. How often have we noticed the troubled, fearful expression on the face of a sleeping child, who was sent to bed with anger thoughts, with fear thoughts in its mind after a severe scolding or perhaps a whipping. A child should never be scolded or frightened, or teased, especially just before bedtime. It should be encouraged to fall asleep in its sweetest, happiest mood, in the spirit of love. Then its sleeping face will reflect the love spirit and the child will awaken in the same spirit, as though it had been talking with angels while it slept. Children are peculiarly susceptible to the influence of our thoughts, our suggestions to them during sleep. Their character can be molded to a great extent, their ability developed, their faults eradicated, and their weak points strengthened during sleep. In some ways the suggestions made to them in that state have more effect than those made to them when awake, because while the objective mind often scatters and fails to reproduce what is presented to it, the subjective mind gradually absorbs and reflects every suggestion. Many mothers have found this true, especially in correcting bad habits which seemed almost impossible to reach while the children were awake. If you want to make your child beautiful in character, in disposition, in person, think beautiful thoughts into its mind as it falls asleep, speak to it of beautiful things while it sleeps. I believe the time will come when much of the child's training will be effected during sleep. Its aesthetic faculties, the love of music, of art, of all things noble and beautiful, special talents, and latent possibilities of all kinds will be developed through suggestion. In the marvelous interior creative forces lies the great secret of life, and blessed is he who findeth it. Doubly blessed is he who findeth it at the start of life. 15. How to stay young. We do not count a man's years until he has nothing else to count. R. W. Emerson. The ability to hold mentally the picture of youth in all its glory, vivacity, and splendor has a powerful influence in restraining the old age processes. Old age begins in the heart. When the heart grows cold, the skin grows old, and the appearances of age impress themselves on the body. The mind becomes blighted, the ideals blurred, and the juices of life congealed. Many people look forward to old age as a time when, as a recent writer puts it, you have a feeling that no one wants you, that all those you have borne and brought up have long passed out onto roads where you cannot follow, that even the thought life of the world streams by so fast that you lie up in a backwater, feebly, blindly groping for the full of the water, and always pushed gently, hopelessly back. There is such a thing as an old age of this kind, but not for those who face life in the right way. Such a pathetic, such a tragic ending is not for those who love and are loved, because they keep their hearts open to the joys and sorrows of life, who maintain a sympathetic interest in their fellow beings and in the progress and uplift of the world, who keep their faculties sharpened by use, and whose minds are constantly reaching out, broadening and growing, in the love and service of humanity. A dismal, useless old age is only for those who have not learned how to live. Growth in knowledge and wisdom should be the only indication of our added years. Professor Mechnikov, the greatest authority on age, believes that it is possible to prolong life, with its maximum of vigor and freshness, until the end of its normal cycle, when the individual will gratefully welcome what will be a perfectly happy release. At this point he claims that the instinct of death will supplant the instinct of life, when the bodily mechanism approaches the natural end of normal exhaustion. He believes that men should live and maintain their usefulness for at least 120 years. The author of Philosophy of Longevity tells us that man can live to be 200 years old. Jean Finot says, speaking physiologically, the human body possesses peerless solidity. Not one of the machines invented by man could resist for a single year the incessant taxes which we impose upon ours. Yet it continues to perform its functions notwithstanding. What we have a horror of is the premature death of the faculties, the cutting off of power, opportunity, the decay of the body many years before the close of the life on earth. We shudder at the giving up of a large part of life that has potency of work, of action, and of happiness. This horror of senility increases, because life continually grows more interesting. There never was a time when it seemed so precious, so full of possibilities, when there was so much to live for, as in this glorious present. There never was a time when it seemed so hard to be forced out of the life race. We are on the eve of a new and marvelous era, and the whole race is on the tiptoe of expectancy. Never before was the thought of old age as represented by decay and enforced inactivity so repugnant to man. But why should anyone look forward to such a period? It is just this looking forward, the anticipating and dreading the coming of old age, that makes us old, senile, useless. The creative forces inside of us build on our suggestions, on our thought models, and if we constantly thrust into our consciousness old age thoughts and pictures of decrepitude, of declining faculties, these thoughts and pictures will be reproduced in the body. A few years ago a young man died of old age in a New York hospital. After an autopsy the surgeons said that while the man was in reality only 23 years old he was internally 80. If you have arrived at an age which you accept as a starting point for physical deterioration, your body will sympathize with your conviction. Your walk, your gait, your expression, your general appearance, and even your acts will all fall into line with your mental attitude. A short time ago I was talking with a remarkable man of 60 about growing old. The thought of the inevitableness of the aging processes appalled him. No matter, he declared, what efforts he might make to avert or postpone the decrepitude of age there would come a period of diminishing returns, and though he might fight against it he would ever after be on the decline of life, going irrevocably toward the sunset, ever nearer and nearer to the time when he should be useless. The conviction that every moment, every hour, every day takes me so much nearer to that hole in the ground from which no power in heaven or earth can help us to escape is ever present in my mind, he said. This progressive, ever-active retrogression is monstrous. This inevitably decrepit old age staring me in the face is robbing me of happiness, paralyzing my efforts and discouraging my ambition. But why do you dwell on those things that terrify you? I asked. Why do you harbor such old age thoughts? Why are you visualizing decrepitude, the dulling and weakening of your mental faculties? If you have such a horror of the decrepitude, the loss of memory, the failing eyesight, the hesitating step, and the general deterioration which you believe accompany old age, why don't you get away from these terrifying thoughts, put them out of your mind instead of dwelling on them? Don't you know that what you concentrate on, what you fear, the pictures that so terrify you, are creating the very conditions which you would give anything to escape. If you really wish to stay the old age processes, you must change your thoughts. Erase everything that has to do with age from your mind. Visualize youthful conditions. Say to yourself, God is my life. I cannot grow old in spirit, and that is the only old age to fear. As long as my spirit is youthful, as long as the boy in me lives, I cannot age. The great trouble with those who are getting along in years is that they put themselves outside of the things that would keep them young. Most people after 50 begin to shun children and youth generally. They feel that it is not becoming to their years to act as they did when younger, and day by day they gradually fall more and more into old age ways and habits. We build into our lives the picture patterns which we hold in our minds. This is a mental law. When you have reached the time at which most people show traces of their age, you imagine that you must do the same. You begin to think you have probably done your best work, and that your powers must henceforth decline. You imagine your faculties are deteriorating, that they are not quite so sharp as they once were, that you cannot endure quite so much, and that you ought to begin to let up a little, to take less exercise, to do less work, to take life a little easier. The moment you allow yourself to think your powers are beginning to decline, they will do so, and your appearance and bodily conditions will follow your convictions. If you hold the thought that your ambition is sagging, that your faculties are deteriorating, you will be convinced that younger men have the advantage of you, and, voluntarily, at first, you will begin to take a back seat, figuratively speaking, behind the younger men. Once you do this, you are doomed to be pushed farther and farther to the rear. You will be taken at your own valuation. Having made a confession of age, acknowledged in thought and act that, in so far as work and productive returns are concerned, you are no longer the equal of young men, they will naturally be preferred before you. If people who have aged prematurely could only analyze the influences which have robbed them of their birthright of youth, they would find that most of them were a false conviction that they must grow old at about such a time. Needless worry, all worry is needless, silly anxiety, which often comes from vanity, jealousy, and the indulgence of such passions as excessive temper, revenge, and all sorts of unhealthy thinking. If they could only eliminate these influences from their lives, they would take a great leap back toward youthfulness. If it were possible to erase all of the scars and wrinkles, all the effects of our aging thoughts, aging emotions, moods, and passions, many of us would be so transformed, so rejuvenated that our friends would scarcely know us. The aging thoughts and moods and passions make old men and women of most of us in middle life. The laws of renewal, of rejuvenation are always operating in us, and will be effective if we do not neutralize them by wrong thinking. The chemical changes caused in the blood and other secretions by worry, fear, the operation of the explosive passions, or by any depressing mental disturbance, will put the aging processes in action. Whatever we establish as a fixed conviction in our lives we transmit to our children, and this conviction gathers cumulative force all the way down the centuries. Every child in Christian countries is born with the race belief that 60 years or 60 years and 10 is a sort of measure of the limit to human life. This has crystallized into a race belief, and we begin to prepare for the end much in advance of the period fixed. As long as we hold this belief, we cannot bar out of our minds the consequent suggestion that when we pass the half-century limit our powers begin to decline. The very idea that we have reached our limit of growth, that any hope of further progress must be abandoned, tends to etch the old age picture and conviction deeper and deeper in our minds, and of course the creative processes can only reproduce the pattern given them. Some men cross the zenith line, from which they believe they must henceforth go downhill, a quarter of a century or more earlier than others, because we cross this line of demarcation mentally first, cross it when we are convinced that we have passed the maximum of our producing power and have reached the period of diminishing returns. Many people have what they are pleased to call a premonition that they will not live beyond a certain age, and that becomes a focus toward which the whole life points. They begin to prepare for the end. Their conviction that they are to die at a certain time largely determines the limitation of their years. Not long since, at a banquet, I met a very intelligent, widely read man who told me that he felt perfectly sure he could not possibly live to be an old man. He cited as a reason for his belief the analogy which runs through all nature, showing that plants, animals and all forms of life which mature early also die early, and because he was practically an adult at 15 he was convinced that he must die comparatively young. He said he was like a poplar tree in comparison with an oak, the one matured early and died early, the other matured late and was very long-lived. So thoroughly is this man under the dominion of his belief that he must die early that he is making no fight for longevity. He does not take ordinary care of his health, or necessary precautions in time of danger. What is the use, he says, of trying to fight against nature's laws? I might as well live while I live, and enjoy all I can, and try to make up for an early death. Multitudes of people start out in youth handicapped by a belief that they have some hereditary taint, a predisposition to some disease that will probably shorten their lives. They go through life with this restricting, limiting thought so deeply embedded in the very marrow of their being that they never even try to develop themselves to their utmost capacity. Our achievement depends very largely upon the expectancy plan, the life pattern we make for ourselves. If we make our plan to fit only 1/2 or 1/3 of the time we ought to live, naturally we will accomplish only a fraction of what we are really capable of doing. I have a friend who from boyhood has been convinced that he would not live much, if any, beyond 40 years, because both his parents had died before that age. Consequently he never planned for a long life of steady growth and increasing power, and the result is he has not brought anything like all of his latent possibilities into activity, or accomplished 1/4 of what he is really capable. It is infinitely better to believe that we are going to live much longer than there is any probability we shall than to cut off precious years by setting a fixed date for our death simply because one or both of our parents happen to die about such an age, or because we fear we have inherited some disease, such as cancer, which is likely to develop fatally at about a certain time. Just think of the pernicious influence upon a child's mind of the constant suggestion that it will probably die very young because its parents or some of its relatives did, that even if it is fortunate enough to survive the diseases and accidents of youth and early maturity, it is not possible to extend its limits of life much, if any, beyond a certain point. Yet we burn this and similar suggestions into the minds of our children until they become a part of their lives. We celebrate birthdays and mark off each recurring anniversary as a red-letter day and fix in our minds the thought that we are a year older. All through our mature life the picture of death is kept in view, the idea that we must expect it and prepare for it at about such a time. The truth is the death suggestion has wrought more havoc and marred more lives than almost anything else in human history. It is responsible for most of the fear, which is the greatest curse of the race. A noted physician says that if children, instead of hearing so much about death, were trained more in the principles of immortality, they would retain their youth very much longer, and would extend their lives to a much greater length than is now general. I believe the time will come when the custom of celebrating birthdays, of emphasizing the fact that we are a year older, that we are getting so much nearer the end, will be done away with. Children will not then be reminded so forcibly once in 365 days that each birthday is a milestone in age. We shall know that the spirit is not affected by years, that its very essence is youth and immortality. In our inmost souls we shall realize that there is a life principle within us that knows neither age nor death. We shall find that old age is largely a question of mental attitude, and that we shall become what we are convinced we must become. As a matter of fact, the average length of life is steadily increasing, because science is teaching men how to live so as to conserve health and youth. Formerly men and women grew old very much earlier than they do now, and they died much younger. We do not think so much about dying as they used to in the early days of this country, when to prepare for the future life seemed to be the chief occupation of our Puritan ancestors. They had very little use for this world and did not try to enjoy life here very much. They were always talking and praying and singing about the life over there, while making the life here gloomy and forbidding. They forgot that the religion Christ taught was one of joy. There is no greater foe to the aging processes than joy, hope, good cheer, gladness. These are the incarnation of the youthful spirit. If you would keep young, cultivate this spirit, think youthful thoughts, live much with youth, enter into their lives, into their sports, their plays, their ambitions. Play the youthful part, not half-heartedly, but with enthusiasm and zest. You cannot use any ability until you think, until you believe, you can. Your reserve power will stand in the background until your self-faith calls it into action. If you want to stay young, you must act as if you felt young. If you do not wish to grow old, quit thinking and acting as if you were aging. Instead of walking with drooped shoulders and with a slow, dragging gait, straighten up and put elasticity into your steps. Do not walk like an old man whose energies are waning, whose youthful fires are spent. Step with the springiness of a young man full of life, spirit and vigor. The body is not old until the mind gives its consent. Stop thinking of yourself as an old man or an old woman. Cease manifesting symptoms of decrepitude. Remember that the impression you make upon others will react on yourself. If other people get the idea that you are going downhill physically and mentally, you will have all the more to overcome in your effort to change their convictions. When we are ambitious to obtain a certain thing, and our hearts are set on it, we strive for it, we contact with it mentally, and through our thoughts we become vitally related to it. We establish a connection with the coveted object. In other words, we do everything in our power to obtain it, and the mental effort is a real force which tends to match our dream with its realization. An up-to-date modern woman is a good example of what I mean. She does not act like an old lady, and does not put on an old lady's garb after she has passed the half-century milestone. We do not see the old lady's cap, the old lady's gown of the past anymore. Women getting along in years nowadays dress more youthfully and appear younger than their grandmothers did at the same age. They do everything to make themselves appear young. Men are much more likely than women to grow careless in regard to personal appearance as they grow older. They wear their hair longer, they let their beard grow, they stoop their shoulders, drag their feet when they walk, and begin to neglect their dress. They are not as careful in any respect to retain their youthful appearance as women, who resort to all sorts of expedients to ward off signs of age and to retain their attractiveness. The habit of growing old must be combated as we combat any other vicious habit, by reversing the processes by which it is formed. Instead of surrendering and giving up to old age convictions and fears, stoutly deny them and affirm the opposite. When the suggestion comes to you that your powers are waning, that you cannot do what you once did, prove its falsity by exercising the faculties which you think are weakening. Giving up is only to surrender to age. We tend to find what we look for in this world, and if, as we advance in years, we are always looking for signs of old age, we will find them. If you are constantly on the alert for symptoms of failing faculties, you will discover plenty of them, and the great danger of this is that we are apt to take our unfortunate moods for permanent symptoms. That is, some day perhaps you cannot think as clearly, you cannot concentrate your mind as well, you do not remember as readily as you did the day before, and you immediately jump to the conclusion that a man of your age must begin to fail, cannot expect as much of himself as when he was younger. In other words, a person whose mind is concentrated upon his aging processes is inclined to draw a wrong conclusion from his temporary moods and feelings, mistaking them for permanent conditions. The majority of people who are showing the signs of premature aging are suffering from chronic thought poison, that is, the chronic old age poison. From the cradle they have heard old age talk, the reiteration of the old age belief that when a person reached about such an age he would then naturally begin to let up, to prepare for the end. And so instead of fighting off age by holding the eternal youth thought and the vigor thought, they have held the thoughts of weakness and declining powers. When they happen to forget something, they say their memory is beginning to go back on them, their sight will soon begin to fail, and they go on anticipating signs of decline and decrepitude until the old age visualization is built into the very structure of their bodies. Instead of forming the habit of looking for signs of age, form the habit of looking for signs of youth. Form the habit of thinking of your body as robust and supple and your brain as strong and active. Never allow yourself to think that you are on the decline, that your faculties are on the wane, that they are not as sharp as they used to be, and that you cannot think as well, because your cells are becoming old and hard. He ages who thinks he ages. He keeps young who believes he is young. We get a good hint of the power of mental influence in the marvelous way in which many of our actresses and grand opera singers retain their youthfulness, because they feel that it is imperative that they should do so. Had Sarah Bernhardt, Adelina Patti, Lily Lehman, Madame Schumann-Heink, Lillian Russell, and scores of other actresses and singers pursued any other vocation, they would undoubtedly have been at least 10, perhaps 20 years older in appearance than they are. There are too many exceptions to the race belief that man's powers begin to wane at 50, 60, or 70 to allow oneself to be influenced by it. We really ought to do our best work after 50. If the brain is kept active, fresh and young, and the brain cells are not ruined by a vicious life, worry, fear, selfishness, or by disease induced by wrong living or thinking, the mind will constantly increase in vigor and power. Men and women whose faculties are sharp and whose minds are keen and vigorous at 90, and even at 100, prove this. I know a number of men in their 70s and 80s who are as sturdy and vigorous physically and mentally today as they were 20 years ago. Only recently I was talking with a businessman who broke down at 40 from overstrain but who is now, in his 80th year, more buoyant and elastic in mind and body than many men at 50. This man does not believe in growing old because he knows that 10 years ago he did not have a bit of the cell material in his body that he has today. Why should I stamp these new body cells with 80 years, he says, when not a single one of them may be a quarter of that age? Many of us do not realize the biological fact that nature herself bestows upon us the power of perpetual renewal. There is not a cell in our bodies that can possibly become very old, because all of them are frequently renewed. Physiologists tell us that the tissue cells of some muscles are renewed every few months. Some authorities estimate that 80 or 90% of all the cells in the body of a person of ordinary activity are entirely renewed within a couple of years. One's mental attitude, however, is the most important of all. There is no possible way of keeping young while convinced that one must inevitably manifest the characteristics of old age. The old age thoughts stamp themselves upon the new body cells, so that they very soon look 40, 50, 60, or 70 years old. We should hold tenaciously the conviction that none of the cells of the body can be old because they are constantly being renewed, a large part of them every few months. It is impossible for the processes producing senility to get control of the system, or to make very serious changes in the body, unless the mind first gives its consent. Age is not so much a matter of years as of the limpidity, the suppleness of the protoplasm of the cells of the body, and there is nothing which will age the protoplasm like aging thoughts and serenity enemies, such as worry, anxiety, fear, anger, hatred, revenge, or any discordant emotion. If you keep your protoplasm young by holding youthful ideals, there is no reason why you should not live well into the teens of your second century. Constantly affirm, I am young because I am perpetually being renewed, my life comes new every instant from the infinite source of life. I am new every morning and fresh every evening, because I live, move, and have my being in Him who is the source of all life. Not only affirm this mentally, but also audibly. Make this picture of perpetual rejuvenation and recreation so vivid that you will feel the thrill of youthful renewal through your entire system. Some people try to cure the physical ravages made by wrong living and wrong thinking by patching their bodies from the outside. The beauty parlors in our great cities are besieged by women who are desperately trying to maintain their youthful appearance, not realizing that the elixir of youth is in one's own mind, not in bottles or boxes. Is there anything quite so ghastly as to see an old lady, really old because her heart is no longer young, with a painted or enameled face, dressed like a young girl. Such a woman deceives no one but herself. Other people can see the old, dry skin beneath the rouge. They can see the wrinkles which she tries to disguise. She cannot cover up her age with such frivolous pretenses. The painting of cheeks and wearing of girlish frocks do not make a person young. It is largely a question of the age of the mind. If the mind has become hardened, dry, uninteresting, if there is no charm in the personality, one is old, no matter what his or her years count. Idle, selfish women of wealth who live an animal life, who are constantly doing things which hasten the appearance of old age, overeating, overdrinking, oversleeping, idling life away, having nothing to do but gratify every luxurious whim, are the best customers of beauty doctors, who try to erase the earmarks of old age by treating the skin and the hair. Doctoring the effects instead of trying to remove the cause of old age never has been, and never can be, really successful. You cannot repair the ravages of age on the outside. You must remove the cause, which is in the mind, in the heart. When the affections are marbleized, when one ceases to be sympathetic and helpful and interested in life, the ravages of old age will appear in spite of all the beauty doctors in the world. I know indolent wives of rich men, who cannot understand why they age so rapidly in appearance when living such easy, carefree, worry-free lives. They are puzzled to know why it is when they do not have to work, when they have no cares, when their wants are all supplied without any effort of theirs, they do not retain their youthful appearance many years longer than they do. The fact is those women stagnate, and nothing ages one faster than mental and physical stagnation. Work, useful employment of some sort, is the price of all real growth, of all real human expansion. He, or she, who indulges in continuous idleness pays the price in constant deterioration, physical, mental and moral. A ship lying idle in the wharf will rot and go to destruction much more rapidly than a ship at sea in constant use. Every force in nature seems to combine in corroding, destroying the unused thing, the idle person. Work, love, kindness, sympathy, helpfulness, unselfish interest, these are the eternal youth essences. These never age, and if you make friends with them they will act like a leaven in your life, enriching your nature, sweetening and ennobling your character, and prolonging your youth even to the century mark. We are learning that the fabled fountain of youth lies in ourselves, is in our own mentality. Perpetual rejuvenation and renewal are possible through right thinking. We look as old as we think and feel, because thought and feeling maintain or change our appearance in exact accordance with their persistence or their variations. It is impossible to appear youthful and remain young unless we feel young. Youthful thinking should be a life habit. 16. Our oneness with infinite life. He lives best and most who gives God his greatest opportunity in him. If we only knew how to live and move and have our being in him, to be conscious of this every instant, we should then know what true living means. We should be satisfied, for we should then awake in his likeness. Deep within every heart that has not dulled the sense of its inner vision is the belief that we are one with some great unknown, unseen power, and that we are somehow inseparably connected with the infinite consciousness. It is a mental law that thoughts and convictions can only attract their kind. A hatred thought is a hatred magnet, and the longer we harbor it, the more steadily we contemplate it, focus our minds upon it, the larger and more powerful the hatred magnet becomes. In the early days of the Great European War, a Jewish soldier, in the first line of a Russian battalion, engaged in a man-to-man fight with an Austrian in the opposing battalion. In their desperate encounter, the Russian Jew drove his bayonet through the breast of his opponent. As the latter, an Austrian Jew, fell mortally wounded, with his dying breath he gasped the Hebrew prayer, which begins, "Hear, O Israel." The Russian, realizing that he had killed a brother Jew, overcome with horror, fell fainting on the battlefield. When he regained consciousness he was a raving lunatic. When will men realize that we are all brothers, that we are all members of the same great human family, children of the same great Father-Mother God? When will we see that though oceans and continents divide us, though we may speak different tongues, may differ in race, color and creed, yet we are so closely related in thought and motive that our deepest, most vital interests are identical? Time and again, despite all outward differences, has that invisible bond of union which binds mankind into one great family manifested itself even on the battlefield. There men who have sabered or shot at and wounded each other have become fast friends and learned to feel their brotherhood. Many and many a time has it happened that soldiers who had been bitter enemies in battle and had tried in every way to kill each other, have found while convalescing side by side that they were really one in sympathy and feeling, brothers at heart, and did not know it. If these men had known and seen into one another's soul before the battle as they had afterwards in the hospital, they never could have been induced to fire at or to try to injure one another. In spite of our failures, our blunders, our crimes, the nations are coming closer and closer together. Scientific discoveries, marvelous inventions, the extended use of steam and electricity, the conquest of the air, all these are fast welding the interests of mankind and bringing into close and intimate relation the most distant countries of the globe. The Occident and the Orient are no longer at the ends of the earth. They are beginning to know and to respect each other, and to learn each from the other. They are beginning to realize in its largest sense the truth of Kipling's utterance. But there is neither east nor west, border, nor breed, nor birth, when two strong men stand face to face, though they come from the ends of the earth. Scientists are piling up proof after proof of the unity, not only of mankind, but of everything in the universe, of the oneness of all life. They are demonstrating that there is but one substance, one eternal force or essence in the universe, and that all we see is but a varying expression of it. Everything about us is merely a modification, a change of form of this universal substance, just as electricity is a manifestation of force in various forms, in its unchained power in rending giant trees and destroying huge buildings, and as harnessed by man in moving trains, in lighting our homes, in furnishing heat for cooking, and in many other domestic and industrial devices. The lesson of lessons for us to learn from this is our inseparable union with the Creator of life, that everlasting, eternal unity of spirit, that oneness with the Father which Christ came to teach. I and the Father are one. I am the vine, ye are the branches. We are as closely united one to the other, and all to the Father as are the branches to the parent stem. When we are conscious of our union, of our co-partnership with the infinite, we feel an added power, just as the branch feels the force of the life currents flowing into it from the vine. Severed from the parent stem, the same branch would not feel so confident. It would soon find that of itself it could do nothing, and in a short time it would wither and die. The moment we pluck a flower from its stem, it begins to wilt and fade because it is separated from the source of its life. Cut off from the great chemical laboratory of nature, from the creative, miracle-working energy of the sun, the soil, and the atmosphere, it dies within a few hours. The moment we are cut off from our divine source, we begin to wither, shrivel, and die. As long as we remain separate, nothing can stop this fatal blighting process. When we are not fed from our source, we are like the branch severed from the parent vine, like the flower plucked from its mother stem. My experience has shown that people who, from different causes, feel cut off from connection with the divine source of things suffer intensely from fear. They are filled with a vague, but overmastering terror which presses upon them with greater force because it is unseen, unknown. They dimly feel that, like meteors in the sky which have passed beyond the controlling gravity governing the other heavenly bodies, they are separate, unrelated human atoms without assurance that they are under a protective, guiding, sustaining power. Victims of extreme nervous diseases are often overwhelmed with a sense of utter isolation, of being cut off from every sustaining force, and they are terror-stricken, just as a child who has lost its way, and knows not where to turn. Temporarily, and in a lesser degree, people who are terrified in a thunderstorm and rush to a cellar, anywhere to hide themselves from threatened danger, suffer from this feeling of separation, of aloneness. All who are affected in this way would be greatly benefited by dwelling on such biblical passages as, "In him we live and move and have our being, the Father in me and I in the Father." These are strictly scientific truths. We could not live or move or have any being apart from the power that made us, that sustains and supports us, and the consciousness of this gives a steadying, buttressing sense of security and safety that nothing else can. Our individual strength comes from our conscious oneness with omnipotence, just as our national or corporate strength is derived from union with one another. Each human being is like a drop of water in the ocean. He is not independent. He cannot work alone. Consciously or unconsciously he is a part of the masses all around him. He is touched by other water drops on every side, and his existence, his success is largely dependent upon his union with the others. Even if a drop of the ocean could separate itself from the mass and should try to live its own life in its own way, it would soon cease to exist as a drop. A man cannot accomplish much alone. His success depends on his union with other men. His dignity and strength are reinforced by the organization or association of which he is a unit, as a cable is reinforced by the sum of the strength of its separate wires. Nature, says Humboldt, is unity in diversity of manifestation, one stupendous whole, animated by the breath of life. When we come into conscious realization of the truth that we are a part, the most important part, of the stupendous whole created by God, and that we are working in cooperation with Him, we will come into possession of a power and dignity which will make our lives sublime. The greatest minds of all ages have drawn their strength from the invisible source, from their vital connection with the power which creates, and works through every one of us. They have also believed in the great mission of the race, believed in a divine plan running through the universe which works for righteousness, and shapes the destiny of the race. This faith in the Godward movement of the great human current has characterized even those who did not openly profess any religious faith. Their belief in the divinity of humanity has been a strong factor in their character, and the root source of their power. This same faith, this unquestioned confidence in the divine cosmic intelligence, has given more comfort, has brought more peace of mind, and happiness to vast multitudes of human beings than any other thing. Indeed, it is the only thing that can bring us true peace, enduring happiness. There is something beside brain force needed to make a man a real constructive power in the world, and that is his divine connection, his being in the current which runs Godward. Without this essential, notwithstanding all that the mind and the body can do for us, we feel a void in our being, a great lack, a longing, a yearning for something, we know not what. Without this, even though we have the most complete physical and mental equipment, we are like a new electric car, ready for service, thoroughly equipped in every detail, except the trolley pole, which makes the connection with the electric current. Completion, satisfaction, divine energy can only come from attuning ourselves to something beyond the physical and the mental plane. We must put up our trolley pole and tap the infinite source of power, or else we are, so far as true progress is concerned, in the position of the car that is not connected with the motor force that alone gives it power to move forward. We must tap the divine current running Godward through contemplation, through prayer, through noble deeds, unselfish service, honest endeavor to live up to our best. We cannot make connection with divine power through any selfish cause, any greedy deed. It is a strange thing that human beings will take the chances of cutting themselves off from this mighty current which runs truthward, justiceward, and Godward, and try to make a substitute of their own puny strength. Yet every time we consciously do wrong, every time we depart from the truth, every time we commit a dishonest, unworthy act, do a mean, contemptible thing, we separate ourselves from this current and lessen the omnipotent grip upon us. We break our connection and become a prey to all sorts of fears and doubts. Someone has truly said that, when a man has committed an evil act he has attached himself to sorrow. Because of the unity of all life, he has established relationship between himself and the whole human current of vicious influences, he has made connection with all the forces in the universe that conspire to drag him down, to draw him still further away from the Creator and Inspirer of all good. The converse is equally true. Let a man do a good deed, commit himself to a noble work, and all the creative, uplifting forces will rush to his aid. He will be reinforced by the added power of all others working in the same spirit, on the same plane. All good things vibrate in unison, they belong to the same family. So all bad things vibrate in unison, and belong to one family. Attract one of them and you attract all the others because they are on the same plane. A discouraged, despondent mood, for example, makes connection with the whole discouraged and despondent family, the whole failure army, and when we make this connection our entire being is adjusted to the gloomy, discouraged vibration. If we harbor the poverty thought, the fear of coming to want, we unite ourselves with all the poverty vibrations in the universe, and whatever has an affinity with poverty rushes toward us through the current we have established. On the self-same principle, let one think cheerful, optimistic thoughts, let him make connections with the current of opulence, of the generous, overflowing abundant supply of the Creator, and he allies himself with all the helpful, productive, creative forces in existence. At one time it was thought that we could get no knowledge or impressions excepting through the five senses, but we know now that there are many other avenues by which we communicate with one another. There is a mental, a spiritual communication which is more intimate, more real than any we can make by physical contact or expression. We can sit beside those who are in sympathy with us for hours without touching them, without a word being spoken, without a look, and yet enjoy the sweetest and most delightful converse. We are conscious that our minds are intercommunicating in a deeper, more subtle, satisfying manner than is possible by means of physical contact or through the senses. In fact, there are many occasions in life so sacred that we feel mere words would profane, distress, disturb rather than help or comfort. We are aware that they are too coarse to convey the finest sentiments, that they are too bungling, too awkward to carry the expressions of sympathy, of love back and forth from soul to soul that are in tune with each other. The message of love teaches that the love of life is a single heart beating through God, and you and me. One life runs through all creation's veins. The mind sees beauties which the physical eye never beholds. The mental ear hears harmonies, melodies which the auditory nerve is too gross to perceive. The soul through its closer union with God receives perceptions which even the mind cannot comprehend. By means of this divine connection through the great within of ourselves we can accumulate power that will revolutionize our lives. Right here in our own being we can loose streams of energy infinitely more potent than any physical power. We know that the great cosmic ether everywhere about us is filled with divine vibrations, charged with spiritual force, and omniscient intelligence which are always waiting to flood our minds when we make the right connections and are ready to receive them. This cosmic ether or universal substance is the source of all supply, as well as of that divine power, which most people shut out of their lives because they do not know how to unite themselves with it. They resolutely shut their minds to the divine inflow by refusing to believe in anything that is not demonstrable through the senses. Most of us are very skeptical of the reality of the unseen. We are doubting Thomases, who can be convinced only by the material, by that which we can see or feel. If children could only be trained in a different atmosphere, if they could be made at the start to reach out mentally into the unseen realities and utilize them for their own purposes, just as we mold and fashion material things, there would be comparatively few failures in life. It was intended that man should live in perpetual contact with the power that created him, that would keep him in tune with all that is healthful and good and pure and true, but, unfortunately, we are constantly losing our connection and thus making ourselves impotent, weak, when we might be potent, strong, creative. To live in wireless communication with the divine current that runs through all creation is to be in touch with divinity indeed, is to be divinely successful. No power outside of ourselves can cut us off from communication with this current. Even the worst criminals, those who have been cut off from human society, may still be one with their source if they choose. The Creator has not cut them off, has not discarded them. They have broken the connection themselves. The Creator would not blast with a thunderbolt, would not crush with his wrath the most profane wretch that ever lived, even though he should curse him for creating him. The great love of the Father would still sustain him, keep him alive, feed him, permit the same beautiful sun to shine upon him as upon the greatest saint. All the blessings of nature would still be there for his enjoyment, would be given as freely to him as to the most devoted worshipper. If we could only grasp this superb truth, our oneness with the great creative principle of the universe, it would transform the race. It would banish fear. It would bring peace and harmony into our lives. It would give us a sense of security and satisfaction and happiness such as we never before knew. Until we realize our unity with God and one another, we can never grow to our full stature, we can never utilize the manifold powers at our command. Nor shall we ever reach that glorified manhood which matches the Creator's pattern of the possible man until it is ingrained into every child's nature that he was not only created by his Father-Mother God, but that he is forever after vitally connected with him, that he is nearer to him than his own hands and feet, closer than his own heartbeat. This oneness of the child with his Maker is the principle which must ultimately mold the race into perfect beings.